Welcome to Legalbytes. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. Whether it's live trials or splashy legal headlines, we are here for the facts in the law and no nonsense. Well, unless it comes from our furry four-legged friends, of course. Here is where you bring your unique perspective to agree or disagree with other people, but please, always in a way that's civil and productive. After all, we're here to get to the bottom of the truth with a capital T, and the best way to do that, of course, is with healthy dialogue. So, if that's what you're looking for, jump on in. We would love to have you. Let's get started. Alrighty. Hello, guys. Hello. Happy Tuesday. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a good one. So today is a bit of a heavy topic. We are talking about the excuse me, the case of Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, which of course is talking about the abuse of children. It's anytime we're talking about victims being kids in any sort of capacity, it's a hard one, right? It's definitely going to be a hard one. So, trigger warning, of course, for all of this today. If you are unfamiliar with this case, this is they were both arrested on August 30th, 2023. Ruby is the mom here. She is married, but at the time had an estranged husband who was not living in the house. She and four of their kids were living at the home of Jodi Hildebrandt, her business partner at the time, and like guru, coach / cult leader. Basically, I guess we can describe it as. And so they were living together and sort of on this venture together, and they had banished Kevin Franke from living together with Ruby. And you might also already recognize Ruby Franke and Kevin Franke and they're all of their 6 kids from the YouTube channel 8 Passengers. That is one that has, of course, garnered a lot of criticism over the years. There's been tons and tons and tons of YouTube videos talking about the channel, talking about the problematic ways in which they were punishing their kids, raising their kids, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot. There's a lot in this case. There's a lot of documented history in this case, but none of it that was on YouTube even comes close to what happened in this sort of time period that followed basically when they stopped uploading videos. So over the weekend, the DA released a bunch of evidence to the public, for various reasons. Part of it, I think, because there are a lot of questions that a lot of people have, to include, like, why didn't they charge Kevin Franke for something, some kind of child endangerment, child abuse, something, right? Because he's still the father here. But I think that some of the evidence that comes out, especially as to him, definitely gives a good picture for, I think, why the DA chose to not prosecute him and, maybe try to have him as a potential witness if this was going to go to trial. In the end, we know now, of course, that both Ruby and Jody pled guilty to the charges, and then they were sentenced to a minimum of 4 years each. And so anyway, so and the thing that's so interesting, I was going to say strange, interesting, whatever, whichever way you want to put it, about Utah law is that when you get sentenced, you get a range. You get a minimum and then a maximum, and then they get put in front of a parole board eventually, and that's basically what determines, how long their sentence actually is, which is different from a lot of jurisdictions where at sentencing, the judge will decide this is what you get and this is what you get. Maybe that can get shifted over time with good behavior, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, this is different, right? So we know that they're in prison for 4 years, maybe more, in my opinion, hopefully more based on what's come out. Now, as to the actual evidence that did come out during the weekend or just before the weekend, there's a lot like most of the stuff that got put out there. I understand why they released all of that, why the DA released all of that, because this is mostly jail calls and interviews and things like that. However, there is a lot also that they released that was photos of injuries and body cam footage of the kids and all this kind of stuff. And now, and I will say, it's all blurred out, right? Like their faces are blurred out. And so this is it's treated in the same way as any case involving minors, right? They blur the faces to preserve anonymity for the children that are involved in the case. However, this is a very, very, very different case because of the fact that these children, the ones particularly who are the victims in this specific case, um are very well known. I mean, they've been known, their identities have been known to the internet since basically their conception in some cases. They just I So, we can pretend that we don't know who these kids are. We can pretend that we don't know their identities, but there's so much out there about them already that like you don't like it is literally pretending, right? You have to in order to be like, "Oh, we're preserving the anonymity of this child." You have to pretend that because you can just very very easily get the information as to who they are elsewhere on the internet. So, anyway, I really struggle with that aspect of the DA releasing this information. I mentioned this on Friday in the members only. So those of you who are members who were there, you might remember a little bit of discussion that we had. I was just sort of digesting the information that was going to be released at the time. They hadn't yet released the information at that point, but I remember thinking like, I don't know about like, I hope they don't release these images. I hope they don't release, like the like any sort of images or video of the actual injuries. Because these kids, like I said, have already had their entire lives broadcast, the best moments and the worst moments up to that point. And at the same time, like they have a very hard road ahead of them in terms of trying to recover from their childhood, trying to mend the harms, the very real harms that have been caused to them in various ways. So anyway, so I have a hard time with the fact that those images are out there because of the fact that like to me, yes, it's very shocking to see that, to see images of wounds being bandaged with cayenne pepper and honey and then plastic wrap and duct tape and seeing ropes around limbs and things like that. Like that is awful, awful, awful stuff. I don't know that we need to see it to know just how bad that was though. And to me, on a certain level, it seems like it benefits more than anyone the media. It seems like it's trauma tourism. And when it's kids, it's bad. It's bad. Um, yeah. Yeah, Nico Kiski, cayenne pepper in the wounds. Yeah, yes, yes. There's a lot of details that came out on this. So we will not be going through any of the photos or body cam footage of the kids or anything like that because of the fact that I don't want to be taking part in that sort of like trauma tourism of kids. I feel very uncomfortable with that, but we will be going through the other stuff that is jail calls, police interviews, that kind of stuff, because that is all very interesting to figure out. A lot of the questions that are still present in this case for a lot of people because of the fact that um th- there's like I said, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions about things like you know, how manipulative is Jodi Hildebrandt really? Did she manipulate Ruby Franke to the extent that she brainwashed her, or how much of this was Ruby Franke being willing to perform certain abusive acts? Of course, Eight Passengers has a long history of questionable parenting tactics that a lot of people have raised a lot of questions about over the years, and that spans before she was even with Jodi Hildebrandt and influenced by Jodi Hildebrandt as well. And what kind of a role does Kevin have? Does he still bear responsibility in this? Which a lot of people would say yes. As a father, you have certain responsibilities that walking away from kids, walking away from your kids, and just being like, okay, I will agree to not speak with them for over a year is okay. I know of a lot of fathers though that have a hard time with figuring out what their responsibility is with their kids though. So, I've seen both sides of that particular question. And here it's very interesting to get a more nuanced view of all of those dynamics. Okay. So, that's kind of my introduction to all of that. Um and let's get into the actual footage here. So first, what I want to start with is some of the police interviews of of Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, because they're super short, but it's interesting to see how this differs from, say, Hannah Gutierrez Reed or the Crumbly parents, right? Because of, all of them letting their guard down and talking to the police. What happens here, in terms of these two women and talking with the police, etc., and their Miranda rights and all kinds of stuff. I know I got a couple questions from people about Ruby Franke's interview in particular. So we are going to start with that. And then we're gonna go into comparing how they come across there versus in their jail calls with friends and with family and all that kind of stuff. And then we're also gonna get into the interviews with Kevin Franke. There are two of them. They're long. All of these interviews, by the way, I am trying to play them all at 1.25 x speed, because of the fact that this is going to be a bit of a longer live stream anyway. And I'm really hoping that I can get through all of this in one stream. So I'm going to put it at 1.25x, because that's just bumping it up just a little bit, but not so much that you can't understand what's going on. But of course, let me know if you're having any issues with any of the sound, with the speed, that kind of stuff. I'll see what I can do about all of that, and making sure that everybody can understand and of course get everything here. And as always, if you have any questions, let me know. Of course, I will pause and answer and all that kind of stuff. All right, guys. Okay, so here's the first one. This is the interview with Ruby Franke, and this is super short because there's not much substance to be had.
Was this your water?
It's yours if you want it. We'll say that.
We also have snacks if you need anything to eat. So I know I introduced myself to you earlier.
So just right off the bat, sorry, I know we're only 14 seconds in, but offering her food, offering her water, that kind of stuff, because if they are anticipating, if they are going to get an admission from her, if they're going to get a statement from her that is perhaps a confession of some sort, they want to ensure that she's not, that she can't at least claim that she's been put under duress, right? We saw this with the oh gosh, which one was that? Which case did we go over? So one where the guy had his admissions taken out, one of his statements. This is the Doerman case, Chad Doerman case. So this is one of those things, like, having that all be on camera. Is this your water? Do you want food? I think at some point they'll ask if she needs to go to the bathroom or something like that too. So they want to make sure that there's no allegation that she's been put under some sort of physical stress or like biological stress to get some sort of a confession out of her or an involuntary statement out of her.
but my name's Detective Bates, and this is Sergeant Tobler. We're just here to talk to you about kind of a few things involving your kids. So first, do you live down here, or?
Nothing.
Or do you live up north?
No response. Just kind of looks over at the other cop, looks back at her.
Do you want to talk to me about where you live or how many kids you have?
She's just giving her like a slow blink, like as if she's a cat.
So we just spoke with your husband, and he said you guys have 6 kids. Are those all together? Are those all your kids?
She's just staring right back at her. No statement.
I can wait all day. So it's up to you if you want to talk to us about what's going on. Would you feel more comfortable talking to one of us?
Maybe you want me to, I can step out if you want.
Or if you feel more comfortable talking to him, I can step out.
I'll wait till I have a lawyer.
Okay.
I want to wait till I have a lawyer.
So you don't want to talk to us at all? Do you want to answer that? Or you don't want to talk to us about anything?
So, yeah, this is just your chance to tell us. We're just trying to get your side of the story. So it's your chance to do that. But it's up to you.
So I see some folks talking about it, and yes, Draco Amy. Does that count as asking for a lawyer? I know wording is very important there. Wording is very important. And that was a very affirmative statement that she made, that she said, I want to wait until I have a lawyer present. She has said zero. She said nothing. She's got a weird, slow blink rate that seems like she's just sort of like keeping her calm. It's almost like she's in a meditative state. Like she's actively trying to, like, that's the impression that I have, is that she's just trying to sort of like stay centered. Don't say anything. Just, look at him, look at her, look at him, look at her, blink slowly, breathe slowly. Like, this is what this looks like. It's weird. It does look weird. It feels very, very weird. And I think that's just because she's just exerting a lot of control over her own body. But it does feel a little bit inhuman. I'm not gonna lie. But to her credit, she is not saying anything. She's not giving in to anything. But one of the things here is that so this is what the dialogue was just now. She said, I'll wait until I have a lawyer present. That's the one thing that she said so far on camera. Now, one of the things that is interesting here is that we don't see any Miranda rights being given to her at the beginning of this video. Usually what will happen is we'll get the whole thing, and we'll see that at the very beginning. They make sure that that's on camera, all of that, just to make sure that you can observe her body language, observe the things that are happening to her, the circumstances, the context, all of that, just to make sure that everything is kosher for that, right? But with here, this is a much smaller clip, and I think this is just because that's just the way that it's been released to the public. Most likely, they actually have that on an earlier portion of this footage, as it actually exists. But here, so she made the statement, I'll wait until I have an attorney present. And then the female officer said something like a clarifying question, like, are you sure you don't want to say anything to us? And so that I take as a clarifying question, as like, so you don't want to talk about anything at all? Or is there something that you are willing to talk about with us? That I think is okay in terms of, like, what can the police do in this circumstance? Because, to clarify, case law is pretty clear that once a criminal defendant is in a custody situation, they have been hopefully given their Miranda rights. they're in custody and they're being questioned by the police. They are, as soon as they give a statement to the police that they want an attorney present, they will not speak, to them without an attorney present. Those are magic words. So long as it's an affirmative statement, it's not them asking the police, do I need this? Do I need that? Should I have an attorney? No, that's not enough. That's not enough. It's too ambiguous. You need to affirmatively state, I want an attorney present. Otherwise, I'm not telling you anything. Those are the magic words. They are supposed to end the interrogation or the interview or what have you, and then basically walk out of the room and leave. Like that's pretty much what they are supposed to do. The female police officer's question to her is a clarifying question, in my opinion, to say, is this what you're saying? That's fine. The statement after that, I would start to take issue with, because he's like, well, let me go back to it, something along the lines of like, well, we have, we just want to make sure that you've got like, this is the kind of information that we want to get from you, or something like that. Let's see here.
So, yeah, this is just your chance to tell us. We're just trying to get your side of the story. So it's your chance to do that, but it's up to you.
So, but he does say it's a little gray. It's a little gray, because he does say, but that's up to you, right? So he's, I guess you could count that as a clarifying statement, clarifying question also, but it does start to feel like he's sort of pushing on her a bit to try to get information from her. So that starts to be a little bit, I don't know. So let's see what happens after that.
We're just here to talk.
We're just here to talk.
And I mean, I'm not asking any criminal questions. If you don't want to talk to us, just let us know and we'll be done.
I've already told you.
That you want a lawyer? Okay.
She reaffirms it.
Thank you.
So there she gets the clarifying answer to them, reaffirming, yes, I'm going to wait until I have a lawyer present. And so then at that point, it's pretty damn clear to any reasonable person here, any reasonable officer here would see that and be like, all right, we can't do anything else. That's it.
Is there anything else I can get for you in the meantime? I got the water. Do you need a bathroom break or anything like that? No? Okay.
No bathroom break. Nothing. Okay. So that is that one. Like I said, super short, no substantive information. However, we do have an example of a criminal defendant who has properly, even if weirdly, like awkwardly, properly invoked their right to an attorney. Okay. All right. So now this one is the police interview with Jodi Hildebrandt. And it is interesting because she takes a little bit of a different approach, but we're going to have a similar effect here.
Hey Jody, how are you? So I know I introduced myself when we were out there, but again, my name is Detective Bates, and this is Sergeant Franke.
I'm trying to get you to do me a favor. I need you to sit in the seat for me. It's all about camera angles. If you sit in the happen, that'd be great.
Can I get you any water, snacks? Doing all right?
Be expected. How long you lived here in Islands? 11 minutes? 6 years. The same house? You married? See?
Where'd you move from?
Eastern County.
And how long were you up there for?
I'm a little nervous.
You're to be honest with you, if I was sitting over there, I'd be a little nervous too. So don't worry
Rightfully
about
so.
it. We're just here
Rightfully nervous.
to talk, to get your side. And right now we're just asking you just typical questions, like how long you lived here, that kind of thing.
I watched too many detective movies.
How yeah.
Which one's your favorite?
Me too. You can't honestly. I sit there and I'm married, and I sit there and watch those with my wife, and I say, we don't. That's not how we do it. That's not right. So don't take, there's some good ones out there, don't get me wrong. But most of them are probably a little off base. We're not as mean. I won't get up and beat you up. We don't do that.
We just want to get to know you a little. So if you just kind of want to share a little about yourself and what brought you down here. And
So I trust my attorney. He said, don't say anything. And I said, I have nothing to hide. And he's like, I know that, but just let me be there with you when we talk. So you guys seem nice people.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm trying to be difficult. This is really, if you knew all the pieces, I think you'd have a lot of empathy for what's going on.
That's really what we're
looking for. And you're an adult. And the thing about our interview, if we ask you any questions that you don't want to answer, you can just tell us, I don't want to answer that question. But we do want to have a basis and an understanding of what's going on in that home, or what went on up north that brought them into your home. And so if you want to share any of that and you don't want to answer any other questions, that's okay.
I'd like to just tell you, but I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're gonna flip my words. I don't know.
And that's the good thing about cameras. Everything, it's pretty much double recorded, audio, video, and it's for the safety of for you and for us, because we don't want to flip your words. And this will all be pretty much right there to support you. So we're not going to use anything against you.
Be so insistent, man. He's an honest, good man. Goes to church. I trust him. Why would he say that to me then?
I don't know your attorney, to be honest.
Well, I'm just saying he's a
good
good,
man.
honest man.
Yeah, I don't
And
know.
I'm an honest person as well, so we get along
Are you
great.
though?
And he just said, do not say anything.
Maybe just as an attorney,
They always say that.
they always want to be with their client. I'm not sure. But like I said, at any time, if you don't want to answer a question, you don't have to. So the ball's really in your court on what you do want to answer and what you don't. So,
Well, I think it looks bad that I don't want to answer anything, but it's not because I'm trying to be difficult. I'm really hanging on what he told me to do.
Yeah, who's your attorney?
Adam, his father's an attorney, his brother's an attorney.
Is he local?
Yeah,
Is it? I don't know.
he's on the street where the town hall is.
Well,
They all have the same name.
the whole reason we're sitting here today is there's a lot of questions we have that we just maybe misunderstandings that we just need to clarify. And
I know, and I'd love to tell you if you were here, because I don't know, I don't know what's gonna happen with what I say. You know, I'm a psychologist. I've watched people flip things all the time. So I get it.
I feel like this is her kind of that's giving a little bit of a tell. I'm a psychologist. I've watched people, flip things all the time. That is something that she's been described as doing. So interesting. And so far she's been, obviously way less weird than Ruby Franke. She's actually talking to them. She's having a conversation with them, and she's trying to say, look, it's not because of what I want. It's because of what my attorney wants. And I'm listening to my attorney. This is what she's saying. And so they are, obviously trying to see like, what's the boundary of you won't talk to us without a lawyer present, right? Because there are some times that a criminal defendant will say, I want to have a lawyer present for this particular testing, or I really want to have a lawyer present for, this particular this particular subject or something like that. But I'm willing to talk about other stuff. Like that's them drawing a boundary around which the police can say, okay, then let's talk about other stuff, things that are outside of that realm. So this is the cops kind of like testing out that boundary of like, what are you willing to talk about? What are you not willing to talk about?
I sit on your side. I get it. I wish people didn't do that, but they do.
well, if you're not willing to answer any of the questions about yourself, would you be willing to answer any questions maybe about Ruby or Kevin that you could help us understand? We just honestly want to understand what what their dynamic is, what happened to the children, what caused their separation.
Right.
And after talking to Kevin, it sounds like you know a lot about their dynamic and their relationship. So if you could help us understand that at the least, that would be awesome. And that's nothing incriminating towards yourself because it's not pertaining to you. So if you could help us understand that.
Jody, we're gonna do this. You asked for your attorney, and we'll leave it at that. We'd like to maybe talk to you later when you have your attorney here present,
Absolutely.
and we'll
He
go
made
down
an
there, okay?
appointment at 4 on
He made
Friday
an appointment
here.
with, at here, at 4,
He talked to the officer
okay?
and said, can we even make a time? And he said out loud, do not talk to them.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll talk and see if we can schedule that, and maybe that's just something we just do with your attorney. Okay? Do you have any questions for us? I can answer in the meantime.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Appreciate your time. We'll have you hang tight in here, and then we'll come back and get you, and we'll be on our way, okay?
Thank you.
All right. That's it. So she does the same thing that that Ruby does, which is the advice that any criminal defense attorney would give to anyone, whether they are people who should rot in hell, like these two individuals, or they are people who are different. Okay, so that's the two interviews, and we're gonna go now to the actual jail calls that both of them make to show maybe how some of this some like their behavior shifts, but also looking at kind of like what's in their mindset, how are they viewing the charges, the allegations, and all that kind of stuff. So let's go here. So, and also, by the way, that my sources for this stuff are, I mean, there's obviously like a lot of news articles and stuff that have been written about this. There's also Reddit. There's stuff that's on Reddit. There's also one. I mean, there's a few YouTube channels that have it, of course, Long Crime, Court TV, and all that kind of stuff. There's one that I found that had some of these that aren't found on other channels, or at least I couldn't see on other channels. Jessica Danielle is a YouTube channel that I found a number of these interviews and jail calls and things like that. So just wanted to give some credit on that. This one right now is from Reddit, however. Okay, so this is going to be in 3 different parts. So we'll kind of be able to tell the difference between these. Now, I think some of this is there's going to be some white noise that comes on at a certain point. I think that's because of some sort of confidentialities between the two of them. This is a married couple after all, so there is a marital privilege between them. Or it might be because of issues pertaining to minors. So any kind of like names of kids and things like that are not going to be be published in any of these interviews or jail calls or anything.
This is a free call from Ruby, thanking Purgatory Corrections. An inmate at
And also the captions on this are not very accurate, so just keep that in mind.
Purgatory Correctional Facility. This call is subject to.
Also, I'm pretty sure, I mean, this is what the caption says. I don't know if the caption is correct, but it sounds like this is the Purgatory Correctional Facility, which is ironic, very ironic considering like the things that landed them in jail and how they were like talking about it and writing about it and all this kind of stuff of like, you know, their kids can be satanic and all this kind of like they're trying to like make them better with God or whatever. It's like they've been very religious about it. So it's like there's a bit of poetic justice that they're at the Purgatory Correctional Facility.
To recording and monitoring. Press 1 to accept all communications from this inmate and cellmate. To deny this call, press.
There's a little bit of a break here.
Thank you for using Telmate.
Okay, let's get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Okay.
When I saw how long this separation was lasting, I wanted to think of some ways that I could bring in money or make some money if you didn't ever come back. So that's when I asked if you would co-sign on a loan if I found a house. And maybe I could Airbnb it or rent it out, or I've been playing with numbers in my head and I think I could make something, but I don't want to be dumb. I want to be very conservative. So I pulled the money and I have it in a bag. And
With you? Do the police have it?
well, I don't know what the police took. I don't know what the police have.
But the bag is at Jody's house?
They can't just take people's money. I mean, that's not right.
Well, they're not going to take the money, but when they have a search warrant, they have access to everything in the house.
Sure. Yeah.
I have a feeling we're going to need that money.
We might do.
So this is they're talking about the financial need of the family and her being in jail. Maybe she's going to be there for a while. She's talking about maybe Airbnb-ing the house, which it's interesting because this was something that she apparently had planned to do previously while they were separated before she got arrested. This is what I picked up from other interviews. So I don't know if this is her first time talking about this with him. It's from the way that she's saying it, it sounds like it is. But my previous understanding though is that she already had this plan. But it is interesting that he's like, well, we might have other things that we might need to put that money towards at this point, which is absolutely correct. Legal fees are very, very, very expensive, very quick to rack up.
We might do. So I haven't been making big purchases. I've been very conservative. I think the biggest expense has been the kids' schooling, and that's they have enough curriculum to get them for a couple years. So
Okay. I just received a text from Ted Dawson out of the blue. Ted Dawson, who I haven't heard from in years.
what, he just texted you?
So he just talked about a text from Ted Dawson, I think, something like that, about the case. So this is they're talking about the finances here.
Yeah, the story's out. So he said, Stormy sent me an article and it just broke my heart. I just wanted you to know I'm thinking about you, and if I can ever be a resource, we are always here.
Are we in the news?
Are we in the news? She said, because he's reading a text that he got from somebody else, talking about concern that he has because of the news about the whole situation. Tish, I need a timeline. Is this before or after he was interviewed by the cops? I don't know. I don't know. This has been put together from 3 different pieces of conversation that she's had with him, which I've seen in pieces elsewhere, but I have not. So, corroborated. This is, guys, this is real. I do see some questioning in the chat about, like, is this a real thing? It is. I'm not about to put things forward that are like maybe not real. So, but this, I don't, unfortunately, the dates on a lot of these things are not posted with these interviews and whatnot. Okay, let's continue.
It sounds like at least you're in the news. I don't know about me. I don't know what he's talking about. But
I'm wondering if they went to Sherry to like ask her questions.
I don't know.
These bookings are public.
I know they are. And a couple months ago, Business Insider was reaching out to me, and I ignored their email. But I'm going dark.
This is a witch
I'm not
hunt.
at BYU. I'm not at BYU anymore.
I don't know if you guys caught that. I know that the volume is a little bit low on this recording, but she said this is a witch hunt. So this must be early on, not long after she was arrested, before she has a change of heart against Jody, which is maybe authentic, maybe inauthentic. I know folks disagree on that one. But you know, she says this is a witch hunt. So she's pretty affirmative about that. You know, but he says he's going dark. He's not working at BYU right now. So, you know, in case somebody is going to try to reach him, try to get a statement from him, he's not going to be doing any of that.
So I don't know how they're going to find me.
Yeah, maybe it was a blessing. This is a witch hunt.
It's a witch hunt.
The devil's been after me for years. And he's mad as heck that
Okay, this is this is the static I was talking about. Let me skip
I have
ahead.
not
Okay.
Detectives?
I have not said
Sorry. Sorry. Sorry.
I
Okay.
have not said a word until we have an attorney.
She just said, I have not said a word until we have an attorney.
Okay, well, you know that this phone call is being recorded.
You have 1 minute remaining for this call.
Yes, that will come out. That will come out.
Okay.
When we were driven to the jail, the detective was putting us in the car, and Jody said,
There's more. It's whatever conversation between her and Jody is being blocked out with static. I really wish that they had just like taken the sound out.
"Yeah, I trust you." So
They're going to be in the hospital for 3 days.
so weird. It's just not necessary. They're trying to exaggerate this. Oh,
They didn't show me.
Like the hero.
Well, they didn't show me any pictures or anything, but the way they described it, it was very serious.
You have exceeded the allowable time for this call. Goodbye.
Facts.
And please see the truth. I know it's obscured.
She said, okay, so now this is, I think, part 2. This is the second conversation. She said, please see the truth. You know, it's obscured, or even though it's obscured, something like that.
I'm where I see the facts, I see the truth, and that's what I'm gathering.
You know my heart.
What are they charging you with?
2 charges of second-degree felony for child abuse.
2 charges of second-degree felony child abuse.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. That's very serious.
It's interesting. I had the prompting over the last month to read Viktor Frankl. I was reading him, and it was like the worst part was not knowing the end. He said he had an inmate that's man search for meaning. He was a prisoner in World War II, and he said the worst part and the greatest bringing of depression was not the lack of food, and it wasn't the weather conditions. It was not knowing how long it would last. So I think I was prepared for this. I do feel strong.
So she's, in case you couldn't hear it, she's talking about the not knowing, and the not knowing specifically how long things are going to last. That kind of thing is like the hardest part, and she's comparing it. I mean, not that she's comparing it, but what was relayed to her was an example of POWs. I think World War II or Vietnam. I can't remember which one she said. I definitely was just listening. But POWs who talked about how that was the hardest part, not the no food, et cetera, et cetera.
Strong and so calm. And you know what? They may adults have a really hard time understanding that children can be full of evil and what that takes to fight it.
Whoa. Adults have a hard time understanding that children can be evil and what it takes to fight it. I'm sorry. I very much disagree with that. I think a lot of people probably also disagree with that children, of course, kids can be very devious. Kids can be bad, kids or do bad things, I should say. Right? Like kids can do things that are dishonest. They can do things that are disobedient, etc. But like to say that they can be evil, I don't know about that. It's yeah, it shows I think that her referring to the kids as being evil at times reveals a certain depth to the darkness that she considered her kids, which also is an indication of like how far are you willing to go to like punish, to reform, to take that evil out of them, so to speak.
You've seen what it takes to fight evil. It's not the person you're fighting. And it can look like something it's not. And you've been there, you know that. And so I don't know any adults who are going to see the truth. So I'm calm about this, and I just pray that you'll hang in there.
You have 1 minute.
Yeah, some folks talking about his lack of reaction is very interesting. The fact that he's not disagreeing with her, that he's not right. So I mean, he agrees with her to a certain extent, most likely, or perhaps um he is just listening to hear her out of what she said. His second interview with the police is very, very informative about his mental state and why he would be compliant, complicit with the plans of these other women, and why he maybe wouldn't, stand up as a man, as a father, as a husband in various ways, with respect to the welfare of these kids.
Minute remaining for this call.
I think I can call back, but
Yeah, but
And also, yeah, good point, Carolyn V. He's never disagreed with anything she did on the channel. I know, I know a lot of folks talking about that. How there are aspects of this that are that preceded Jody's involvement in their lives, right? Like the fact that they, there was one of the videos that came out was about how I think one of their youngest had gone to school. She had forgotten to bring her lunch, and so the teacher asked her to bring her lunch so that she could eat. And Ruby was like, "No, that's her responsibility. So therefore she can learn her lesson," which is just, exceedingly strict, we can say, to be a bit charitable to Ruby, if we want to be charitable.
but just in case, I'm preparing to step up and fight for the children. They've been taken, and there's going to be a hearing in the next couple of days here in Provo.
I'm sorry, I signaled to Joe. Will you say that one more time?
Yes, I'm prepared to step up and fight for the children. They've been taken into custody. They're in foster care, and there's going to be a hearing within the next 2 or 3 days.
What about Abby and Julie?
Them too, all 4 were taken.
Where did they go to get Abby and Julie?
I don't know. They while I was with them, they got Abby and they were looking
You have
for Julie.
exceeded the allowable time for this call. Goodbye.
You know what you called? You had to put her in.
So that was part 2. So he said that, I'm willing to step up and, and fight for fight for our kids, which is just like you it's like he doesn't realize who he needs to be stepping up against in order to fight for his kids. Coming from an outsider's perspective, on their relationship and on their family and on this whole case, it is pretty wild. The way that it seems to be framed also in his mind, like who are the good guys and who are the bad guys in this kind of a case. All right, part 3.
Her in a chair, and it was horrible. It was torturous last night, hearing the screaming and the banging and people. It's like, okay, that's upsetting. But the most upsetting thing is that I am completely misunderstood. That is the most horrible feeling. Like my own family misunderstands me. They misinterpret me, and poor Jody, they misinterpret her, they misunderstand her. She puts her neck out on the line for people, and then they get mad at her. I mean, it is just horrendous. It's horrendous. And you know what? Every Joseph Smith, every wonderful man of God has had to be misunderstood.
That's right.
And so I'm going to get out of this. Who knows? Maybe in 10 days I'll get out of this. If I'm
It's not going to be 10 days.
If truth prevails right now, or who knows, like 20 years, I don't know. I don't know how long that I'm going to step out. I'm going to say I went through everything. I have seen God's children suffer. All the people here.
Yeah, God's children suffered at your hands, Miss Franke. Oh, Lord.
My jail cellmates have been beautiful women, but they've been hurt. They've been deceived into drugs, and my heart just has so much compassion for them. And
It's so wild to me that this is the direction of her compassion. She has compassion for the other women that are in the jail with her. She has compassion for Jody. She has compassion for all of these adults who have done wrong things. Meanwhile, it's her children who are evil, who deserve punishment. It's very hard to look at Ruby at this point and to say yeah, you're a normal human being that I can empathize with. It's hard. It is hard. But it does seem like some way she has been reframed, or she has reframed herself to have a very strange outlook on the world. Indy agrees. Indy agrees. She has thoughts as usual. Okay.
I have compassion for the cops, and I have compassion for myself, and then to be told that I'm suicidal, I'm like, no, that's not true. Anyway, if you need to let
Sherry, that was either Sherry or one of your siblings.
Well, they're all in cahoots. One means all of them, but yes, you're right. In your hearing, I don't know if you've considered this. I don't know if it'd be helpful, but you could have the house. And if all the kids go to the house, you've got room there, and I will.
So, really quick, just because, thanks so much for the super chat. I'm just glad this stopped where it did and didn't become the second Valo Daybell case. Yeah, I've seen a lot of comments about that. I mean, who knows? Who knows how far that could have gone? All right, let's continue on. I mean, it is weird that the comment about unaliving, that is very strange. I'm not sure, what, like what to do with that, because she says that she's not in danger of doing, anything of self-harm, but I think one of her siblings said that she was, or something like that.
I will gladly stay away and let you guys be. So I don't know if that's helpful. I'm just giving it to you if it is.
Thank you. And in the discussions with my attorney, that's the only way that we're going to retain custody of the children.
That's fine.
He is 35 years in this, and he said even if you are acquitted and are released, they will place legal restrictions on your access to the under 18 children.
I figured such. God told me when I was driving before I called you. I didn't have any information. I didn't know anything. And the Spirit said, your children are going to be removed. And I cried out loud. I'm like, no, I'm not done. I'm not ready. And God told me I'm done. And I just, so. Satan has taken everything away from me that I love. And I'm a good woman. I don't do naughty things.
That's a strange bit of self-perception.
I don't do naughty things. I'm a really good girl.
Ruby, I'm going to do everything that I can to keep truth in our family. And
thank you.
I am committed to our family. I'm committed to you and our marriage, no matter what happens.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will be here to support you in any way that I can.
Well, thank you for stepping up.
I do need to go, but
okay. All right.
Call me back when or if you need.
When will you find out? How can I call you? When should I call so I find out what they say?
I don't know how long this will go, but if you call this afternoon, I will know. This is a preliminary hearing, so there will be no.
Okay. Well, it's hard to get a phone around here. I asked for a phone and it took hours to get it, so it may not be until later tonight. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Good luck. I will be praying for you. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, so that's the end of that portion. Yeah, there's some strange parts to that one towards the end. Some of the language that she uses is a little infantilizing. I saw in the chat. I would agree with that. To say like I'm not a naughty girl. I haven't done naughty things. Like, I'm sorry, you've done sick and twisted and terrible things. So I think that's pretty clear to anyone and everyone. So it's, very, very strange, but you can kind of get a picture of what her mindset is. And all of this is like, when we're talking about this, looking at this from a legal angle, all of these calls are publicly available because they're, public access. This is, as we recently went over in another case, when somebody is in jail, whether they are before or after conviction, when they're in jail, they don't have the same Fourth Amendment rights to privacy as other people do in their own home. So these conversations are routinely recorded by the police, by the corrections facilities. And so these are calls that could potentially be used as evidence, right? So, we can see it seems she's got no remorse. She doesn't even have an understanding that what she did was wrong, it seems like, which I don't think is enough to get to an insanity defense. Like, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the test is that they use in Utah, but typically, a lot of states use a test that, to say that either you have no awareness because you're having some sort of a psychotic break, no awareness of what it is that's going on around you, what reality is, so you have no ability to distinguish the real from the fantasy in the moment at the time that these things happened, or you have an inability to understand that what you did was wrong, and in the moment when the crime, when you did the thing that is the subject of the crime, that you had an inability to understand that what you did was wrong. So those are two possibilities for how how someone can have an insanity defense. It's like, it almost feels like she almost would qualify for that, but I don't think she quite gets there on this. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I just got a question on something. Okay, let's turn now to one of Jody's calls. If you guys thought that was wackadoodle, um, let's go to Miss Jody over here. Okay, so this is the first one, or maybe a first couple calls. I can't remember if this is one or two, but she's talking to some friends here, or a friend, um, about sort of her case.
Nobody wants
Oh,
the
yeah.
truth. Nobody wants the truth. Nobody wants the truth because these kids, I told Doug, I woke up, the spirit told me, it's all the devil. I mean, you've seen him. I mean, I've known you, for 5 years? You've watched him come at me, come at me, come at me, come at me.
Mm-hmm.
And you're exactly right, because he knows I know what he's doing. And he uses these kids. And he uses all of us as the adults, the parents that don't hold the kids accountable. So now it's to make a kid sleep on the floor. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You can't even raise your kids anymore.
So what I'm saying is you're being crucified in public opinion.
Yeah.
So you're
And yeah, by the way, this is at 1.25x. So just so that you guys are aware that the actual conversation is a little bit slower, but I did that to sort of save a little bit of time because I knew that this was going to be a long live stream.
there has to be super prepared. And the only way he's going to get prepared is if you push him and ride him.
Okay, I will. I'll call him today.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem really animated. He seems like, the
Yeah,
pictures are going to destroy you. And I'm like, we didn't do that. We didn't do that. Those pictures we did not do. He did that to himself, yes. Did we put that on him and then he rubbed around and cut himself? Yes, but we didn't do that.
Whoa. Okay, so she admits here that they put those things on him, that they put, rope on him or the duct tape or what have you. And then she says, oh, because he moved around and that, like, he ended up cutting himself with it. Like, he ended up doing that to himself. That is insane. This is an admission right here to defense. I mean, and she's already talking about how, this is a conversation with her attorney, which, by the way, conversation with her attorney is privileged. It is private. It is like one of the strongest privileges that you can have, especially because it is talking about the actual case, about, this is like the conversation that she's relaying to her friend here. And I don't know which friend this is. I don't know the name of the friend. I'm sorry. I saw a question in the chat about this. Has one, who's Jody talking to? I don't know exactly, but this is a friend. But this is a centrally covered conversation with her attorney that she is now relaying to her friend. She is destroying privilege by talking about it to someone else. And she's making an admission about what they did to one of the kids. It's wild. It's wild. And also, this is getting into all of this about the devil. This is the devil that's trying to get to me and all this kind of stuff. This definitely sounds, to a lot of people, this sounds very sacrilegious, right? Look, I'm Christian, I'm Catholic. I practice, and when I hear the way that they talk about God, when I hear the way that they talk about the devil, both of these women, I personally find this to be, I don't know too much about Mormonism. I think they are Mormons. They're or supposedly Mormons in Utah. I know that there are several different versions of it, right? I know that there are some that are accepted, some that are not accepted widely. There are, there are like variations of most religious sects out there, right? And one does not represent the whole. So I do caution folks from making comments on, that are drawing a conclusion about the whole from this particular instance. And they do use a lot of God talk, right? They do use a lot of like they seem to think that they are acting on God's instructions. But I think that there are a lot of people out there who would say this is a bastardization of a number of religious beliefs and like condoned acts and things like that. Anyway, so this is just yeah, so it is pretty wild to listen to. But also, once again, this is an admission right here that would have been used against her at trial.
Do that. I was almost done. I had a guy from a ward that I was saying, I was at the ward. He came over and he gave me a blessing, and he told me probably about 2 months ago, he said, and he doesn't know anything about me. He doesn't know about what I do for a living or anything. And he goes, what you've been doing is going to change. You're going to be teaching differently in the next little while.
Wow.
Like, what in the world? I mean, Ryan.
Keep in mind, people can also learn what not to do, how not to be. There are multiple ways of teaching by example.
I know this sounds crazy, and I still can't put my finger on why it feels this way, but it feels like I was being set up to end up here.
Oh my God.
I know that sounds bizarro. I mean, I shouldn't be here. I haven't done anything wrong.
Right. But my goodness.
You have 1 minute remaining for this call.
But it was like everything got taken out of the house, and it's in a storage unit so that I could come to jail. It sounds crazy, but it really feels that way. I don't know if I'm going to be like some kind of example, but when I get out of here, I have a story to tell, and I am going to try to do everything I can to protect the children, because that's what's happening, is that kids are being horribly.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of the kids, anyways, it's a story, but when you come up with that.
So interesting. She feels like, this is God telling her that she needs to, this is her next stage in life, her next place of teaching people. I hope that people don't learn from her affirmatively speaking, but rather the lesson being what not to do, how not to be. I don't know. All right. Next phone call from Jodi Hildebrandt. Now this one is from February, so I know this because it's in the title of the video. So this is from February 5th, 2024. This is a call to another friend.
This is a call from and paid for by
Jodi Hildebrandt,
an inmate at Purgatory Correctional Facility. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. If you don't wish to talk, hang up now. Thank you for using Telmate.
Are you there?
Yep, there you are.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the Lord says, but first they'll lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons.
So yes, we're about to hear a lot of religious language here, right? A lot of scripture talk. So just so you guys know.
Being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake, and it shall turn to you for a testimony. And then he says, settle it therefore in your hearts not to meditate before what you shall answer, for I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay or or resist. And you know what gainsay means?
Wow.
So then he says, and ye shall be betrayed by both parents and brethren and kinsfolk and friends. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what's going on. And some of you shall be caused to be put to death, and you shall be hated by all men for my name's sake. And then he goes on to say, you know, and I never read that before, but like I've never been in prison, but I just read that.
Yeah.
I just wept. I mean, the Spirit was like, he just said, this is you.
Yeah.
I read.
No, ma'am. You're not being persecuted. You're being held accountable for the horrible, dark, sick, twisted, evil things that you've done to vulnerable little children.
In Mark, that was in Luke, and I read in Mark the same kind of thing, you know, because the Gospels they wrote similarly. So he said, now the brother shall betray the brother, and the father the son, like the father will betray the son, and the children shall rise up against their parents and shall cause them to be put to death. That statement right there is what's going on with me. The children shall rise up and put their parents to death, and ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I probably cried for an hour straight. Just everything clicked, and I said, I'm happy to go to prison. If you continue to read the rest of the chapter, he's like, be grateful. If you're in this situation, be grateful because you're
grateful.
And you will be saved. And
wow, yeah, that's bad.
So, yeah, it's interesting. She seems to have a martyr complex.
My experience to read that from your perspective right now, you know, wow.
Well, I have just been begging him, like, you've got to explain this to me. Like, I cannot logically figure out what's going on here. And that's it. That's what's going on. And the Spirit, I mean, when I feel the Spirit, I have two physiological reactions. I get really like shaky, like I'm shivering, like I'm cold, or I feel heat, like I have a fever run through me.
Yeah. Wow.
I was like burning up. It felt like I was burning up, and I was just shaking with gratitude. Like, here's your answer. Here's what this is.
It's like I can't tell if she's comparing herself to Jesus or if she's comparing herself to the martyrs that the people who are persecuted for following Jesus. Like I can't tell which one she sees herself as, but if I'm looking at her in the context of everything that we've heard so far, I'm thinking it's probably that she sees herself as Jesus.
That's super cool. That's pretty neat. Pretty neat how that works, how the scriptures can do that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, like I said, I have probably every single day just been, you know, trying to logic, trying to understand, trying to be humble, trying to say,
What's
happening?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're living a puzzle, trying to put the pieces together. Yeah.
And in Peter, First Peter, I don't have this one written down. I kind of wrote the other stuff down, so I took it down to the phone. But in First Peter, chapter 4, between verses 12 and 19, I can't remember exactly how he says it, but he's like, when you have something happen to you and it just feels like it's random, it's not random. Like this is intentional. It's not just some crazy act of events that's going on. This is like intentional. And that First Peter chapter 4 was another one of the footnotes to refer to, you know, that reinforced all this other stuff. I'm like, this isn't just some crazy random event. This has purpose. Then I connected it to my blessing, because my blessing I've been reading like several times a day, and the blessing is pretty clear. The first paragraph of it says, you know, these are words directly to you from your Heavenly Father, and according to your faith and diligence, they'll either be a comfort to you or they won't be. You know, so it's however much diligence and faith you want to put in. And then the next paragraph talks about, it says, you are a special spirit, chosen and reserved for these last days and sent forth to the earth in great clouds of glory to share the gospel and prepare the people for the return of the Savior. And it says, one of the reasons you were sent here is to share the gospel. The strongest message you will ever teach is the power of your example. And then he says, through the power of your example in the spoken word, he says, your tongue will be loosed and you will be able to teach the gospel in far and distant nations. And then he says, through the power of your example and the spoken word, you will be a great tool in the hand of the Lord in teaching the gospel to many. So the whole paragraph about an example, an example, an example. I'm like, well, what's a better example than to go to prison unjustly and then go teach the gospel? Go teach the gospel. Like,
yeah.
Plan on doing it.
Yeah.
This is pretty wild.
Yeah, and I mean that's super cool. That lady that's Jewish that you've met, and you know, what a neat thing.
Yeah.
Be able to share with her.
I don't know anything about her meeting a Jewish lady. I kind of wish I had some more context to that, but it sounds like she's trying to convert her to. I don't know if you could if you could classify Jodi as a Christian. I don't know. She's a particular flavor of Christian, I guess. I'm not sure. I don't know. But whatever religion Jodi is.
With her.
Okay. So that's that one there. And also, ZND5, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. Welcome to Bike Club. Normally on Fridays, we've got a members only live stream that's super casual. We just kind of hang out, chat, talk about law stuff, non-law stuff. But this week I'm out on Friday, so we're going to do it on Thursday, 10 a.m. So welcome. And thanks so much for supporting the channel. Really does help. Okay, so next one, we've got another phone call, but this time it's between Ruby Franke and her sister. And this is like right before they went in for, I think, for sentencing. I think this one's going to be a bit of a longer one, but this is where you'll notice that Ruby has a noticeably different tone and very different way that she is talking about Jodi particularly. So she certainly has turned for one reason or another. So let's take a listen here for this one.
Did you see that Jodi pled guilty today?
I did see that. Yes, is that a relief for you?
Sorry, not sentencing, but when they decided to when they went in for their for how they pled.
Yeah, it's a big relief. It's a big relief. There would have been positive the other way too had she not pled guilty. There's enough evidence that she could have been convicted for life.
I think so.
That would have been messy. It would have been really messy, and the kids would have. So
do you and her get the same outcome no matter what now, or is there a chance that it would be different?
That's a really good question. That's one that I've asked Lamar. No, we can still have different outcomes. So Ellie asked a little bit about this. I wrote it out in a text to her. But so the next thing that will happen is I will fill out, and she will fill out probation and there's another P, paperwork. And basically you go through your history and you tell them your history, which there's no history on me. There's nothing, no criminal history, no mental health history, nothing. And I'm also hiring a professional to do a mental health evaluation, just to say she's good, like there's no mental health problems at all. And then that will go to my probationary board. Jodi, she can lie on her paperwork, and she probably will. I don't think she's going to give them her history. But I think in the interview it's going to be apparent that she's mentally ill. And so that will affect how long someone, because they're looking, how repentant are you? How much responsibility are you taking? How are you aware that what you've done is wrong? And she's not. She's the only reason she pled is because she didn't want to do life, and she knew I would testify. The other thing is, on my plea deal, when I come up for probation, the prosecuting attorney can will often, if they think that you're a danger to society, will talk to the probationary board and or write them a letter saying, I think she needs to stay where she is. He's going to stay neutral and not write any letter when my probation comes up, which is a really big deal.
Interesting.
But for her, he's not going to stay neutral.
So remember that in Utah, they go up to a probationary board periodically to determine how long they should be in prison, right? So their sentencing is a bit more fluid than it is in most other jurisdictions. So it sounds like the prosecutor in Ruby's case is going to stay neutral. He's not going to go up and say, this person is a danger to society and should not be let out. But he also is not going to go up and say, oh, she's great, let her out. But that's an interesting development that was part of her plea deal, she says.
Neutral. So we can come up to probation and I can get off on probation and she may not.
So what does probation look like? Like, what does that all entail?
It can look like several different things. I think I'm still learning about this, and I think I never realized how complicated it is. I always thought you pled guilty and they tell you how long you're in.
Yeah, there's a lot of terminology to know.
Yeah, and half of the stuff that is said goes over my head, and then I have to go. I come back and I ask the girls here. I'm like, what does this mean? What does this mean? But probation could look like going home. Like you could go home. Sometimes, it might look like going home with restrictions. Like you can go home, but you need to live with somebody who's responsible, and you can't be around certain people. Like they may say you could go home if your parents agree to house you, but you can't go home to where your kids are living. It could look like something like that. Or it could look like something where I have an ankle monitor. Or it could look like you can go home if you pay a $10,000 fine. Or maybe it could look like instead of serving the rest of your time, we'll give you some good time and you can go home in half the time. So I think that getting off on probation, I think looks like there's several different ways that could happen.
Oh, I see. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And is that usually after you've already served some time then?
Say that one more time.
That's after you have served some time?
Yeah. And I don't know what that is going to be. I don't know if it's... One of the girls said that it would be for me 6 months, but I've also heard it could be 4 years, and some people serve several years before they ever see their probation
4 years is what she got, if I remember correctly.
I'm really still, I could be in there 4 years, I could be in there 30. Like, I really don't know.
Yeah. And that will come in February?
On February 20th.
Okay.
Yeah. And the news that I saw today, Jody's sentence hearing is also February 20th. So I'm going to make a request that we be transferred in 2 different vans. I don't think they're going to accommodate that.
Oh, do they? Okay, I see.
Yeah, when I went to the courthouse last week, what they do, they did this when they transported me to Utah County as well. They pull all the girls. There's only 2 housing here for girls. There's not very many girls here, but there's many for the men. So they take the girls and they put them in a cell together, in a holding cell to wait, and then they get all the men together and they put all the men in the cells, and then they start putting on the ankle bracelets and the chains and the everything on the men so you're sitting in a cell with these women you're going to the court with for an hour, and you're sitting with them. And then they pull the girls out and they line you up, and then they put the shackles on you, and then they take the men out to the men's van, and then they take the women out to the women's van, and then you drive to the courthouse together. And then they take you out.
How far away is your place from the courthouse there in St. George?
30 minutes, 40 minutes.
Okay.
And then you sit in a cell at the court. So if someone's hearing's at 9, this is what happened to me. There was a girl that went with me, and her hearing was at 9, but mine wasn't until 11.
Yeah, I'm seeing in the chat the phrasing that she has men and girls. That's very interesting. That is some weird language to be using to describe the men and women in prison or in jail, I should say. So if you guys if you guys haven't been able to hear it as much, what she's talking about right now is that she's describing to her sister the process of like what everything logistically looks like when they have a hearing or when they have to go to court for some reason. And so, you have to wait over here and then you're bussed together, you're shackled, all this kind of stuff. And so what she's getting at is she's concerned about the fact that her sentencing is on the same day as Jody's. And she doesn't want to be on the same bus. And the reason is because she apparently doesn't want to be around Jody, which is interesting. It is interesting. I do understand that part of her plea deal was an agreement to testify against her. I mean, she did say earlier in this phone conversation to her sister, she said, the only reason why she pled guilty is because there was so much against her and because she knew that I would testify against her. So I can understand her being very uncomfortable with facing Jody, especially after the alleged manipulation, right? My impression is I think that there was some manipulation by Jody of Ruby that does not by any means relinquish the responsibility that Ruby has for her own actions and for the horrible horrors that she committed against her own children. Not by a long shot, but I do think that if we were just to look at in a dispassionate kind of way, how did we get here? I think that this road is paved, at least in part, by manipulation by Jody, at least to a certain extent.
So she went in and she had like a 5-minute hearing. And then we sat in the cell and talked for 2 hours until it was my turn. And then we rode back together. So you pretty much spend several hours together, whoever's going to the court that day with you.
Interesting. So that means on February 20th, it would be you and her going together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When was the last time you talked to her? Was it that day?
Mm-hmm. It was when we were arrested.
Okay.
Yeah. I left early in the morning to go to a dentist appointment with Julie. We left at like 3 in the morning. And she called me sometime in the morning. And so I went back down. But when I got to the house, I mean, it looked like the movies. There was a red fire truck. There was a black van with tinted windows. There were 2 ambulances. There were 20 cop cars. I mean, it was.
Did you just sit in your car?
No, I pulled up and found a spot to park. She lives on a cul-de-sac. I parked in the cul-de-sac, and I walked up, and the driveway was just full of cops, and I just walked up to the cops, and they said, "Are you the mother?" And I nodded my head, and so they took me in and put me in the casita, and I sat there for a couple hours. I just sat there, and then they were finishing looking through the house and stuff, I think, and some of the guys were coming in and out with pizza, and so I think Eve was still there.
Yeah, they were feeding your emaciated child who is completely malnourished
because the ambulance car was there, eating pizza with the police, and then once the kids were taken in the ambulance cars, then the detective came and patted me down and arrested me, and then took me to the courthouse for questioning, which I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't say anything because Lamar was really helpful. Like, if you ever get arrested, don't say anything. I just didn't say anything. And she
How
was like,
did you find Lamar? Was he just assigned to you coincidentally, or did you?
So she has
Lamar, I believe, is her attorney.
She has an attorney that she's used for connections. And
sorry, the question from her sister was how did you find Lamar? Was he appointed to you? How did you end up with him?
And I called him and no one answered, but then she called him and he said, I only do like business law. I don't do criminal law, but which is
which is how any attorney in that role would respond, right? And properly so. We've seen cases where it's a good idea to go with a very well experienced criminal defense attorney if you find yourself in trouble, because we watched the Hannah Gutierrez retrial and saw how it worked out for a first-time criminal defense attorney on a big case to handle things. And yeah, generally speaking, you want the one who's been doing criminal defense and nothing but criminal defense for a very long time, or someone who is working with someone who has a ton of criminal defense work or criminal law work in general, I would say, but most ideally criminal defense work. So, the fact that the connections attorney was like, whoa, hey now, I do business law. I do like corporate stuff over here. I don't do criminal law. I don't do like child abuse cases. Let me send you over there to that guy. That is a very professional and good response by that other attorney.
There's a number of two people who do that I would highly recommend. And so she gave the two numbers, and I got the number from Kevin. I don't know how the numbers got from. I don't know how, but Kevin said, "Here's your attorney, and this is her attorney," and that was the last time I talked to Kevin. It was a couple of days after my arrest, but so I didn't see Jody at all when I went to the house to turn myself in. I didn't see her.
Okay.
And I went. And they took me to the courthouse, and the detective was like, "I've got all night. We can talk all night." And I didn't say anything. I just said, I want an attorney.
That is accurate. We did see that. That is exactly what happened.
So I could hear Kevin in the hallway talking, and then he left. And when they took me out of the room, they took me outside and cuffed me and said, again, they cuffed me again, and then they told me you're under arrest and then they told me two of the charges, and then they had me get in the patrol car, and that's when I saw Jody. I saw Jody.
Okay. Really, really quick, but this is a really, really interesting point here that I didn't want to escape us. Angela Eric Newman, I find it fascinating that she says she stayed quiet and is proud of that, but then she gets on the jail phone to talk to people. Now, these calls aren't nuclear to her case, but they could have been. I agree. It's really, really interesting how, in the very beginning, that very first interview that we watched of her. I mean, this is a still from that interview, right? How she was like almost like alien like, right? Like it was her behavior was like so controlled that it just felt weird, right? It felt very uncomfortable to watch. So so she was so proud of that. And then she goes and has all of these other conversations. I do agree that there's nothing that she's said, at least nothing that I've come across, that is, particularly damaging to her case at all. She seems to have been, pretty smart about that, unlike Jody, who made that admission about like, yeah, we put the stuff on him, but then he cut himself with it. Which is the same damn thing when you are the adult in the room and we're talking about, putting things on kids that are dangerous to kids. So anyway, but yeah, that's a funny point. Very well taken.
Jody was also in the patrol car, and she had surgery.
Also, and this is another very good point. Ohio Palm Mom, the parole department will have access to all of this. Yep. So, any sort of indications in these conversations that they still are, like staunchly keeping their feet where they are, planted where they are, is not going to look good. So I'm thinking specifically about Jody and all of that weird delusional, martyrdom complex talk. And then this conversation, she actually seems different. She seems like, and let me just double check. This is on 1.25x speed. So it is at a faster speed overall, but overall, she seems like the way that she's talking just seems a bit more grounded than the conversations that she had with her husband, with Kevin, over the phone. Those three parts. she just seemed like she was like really, I don't know, like her head was in the clouds in those other conversations that doesn't seem to be present here. Or she seems to be more present here is what I mean to say.
Surgery on her shoulder. She couldn't put her hands behind her back, so then they pulled her out and changed up the way they arrested her so she could drive with her hands in front of her. And then we had about a 45-minute drive to the jail. And that was all.
So this was when she saw Jody on the day that they were arrested, was they were put in the back of the police car together. Jody had some kind of shoulder surgery, so they allowed her to sit with her hands cuffed in front of her. And by the way, like a minute ago, that was not an earthquake, that was Holmes. Pets are earthquakes. It was a pet.
The time I spoke to her, we were in the back, and we didn't say a whole lot. I mean, we talked all the time, but I don't remember really saying a whole lot. We sang hummed a couple of hymns, and she was still justifying the whole time. She's like, don't worry, we'll have our day in court. And then when we were booked in, they put us in separate cells, and we've been in separate cells ever since. So
imagine if they had their day in court. Like, imagine if this actually did go to trial. This would have been insane.
Do you hate talking about that kind of stuff? Does it trigger anything, or is it just?
No, I don't. I think it's fun. No, I don't mind talking about it. It's maybe good for me to talk about it. I don't know if you like talking about it.
I was just wondering if it triggered anything. But if you're doing okay mentally, and then that's okay.
Yeah, it's I think putting the pieces together and just seeing, like, she knew she was lying the whole time. Like, and it's embarrassing too to like repeat it.
This is where things get interesting when she talks about Jody. That she says that Jody knew that she was lying.
Like, oh my gosh, how gullible was I? Oh my gosh, how much power I gave this person, and I didn't see it. But when I realized, so she had, her attorney's name is Doug Terry, and mine's Lamar. And Lamar, you know, maybe a month into it, he's maybe not even that long. He's like, Jody denies everything. She denies having anything to do with this, and I was shocked. I was like, what? And I'm still telling Lamar, like, you know, all of the justifications and all of the, you know, I'm talking like a criminal. I sound like a mad person. He was so patient with me. He would just look at me and, like, kind of dumbfounded, like I said, 2 + 2 is 7, and I really believed it. And he would just stare at me. So I'm like, what am I saying that's so off? And but that's because I really believed it. But then when I heard that Jody was not talking like that, she was denying the whole thing, it told me she knew all along. It's like a little kid who doesn't know it's wrong to pee in their underwear. Like, they don't know. They're not embarrassed by it. It's like, oh, I was supposed to pee in the toilet. Oh, oops. But you get a 6-year-old.
It is weird that she mentions this, because there's a lot in her journals, which we're not getting into today. We just don't have time. But there's so much. I mean, maybe we'll do, let me know, you guys, if you are interested in going through the journal entries, but I mean, I would really want to censor that, because it's horrible. I haven't gone through all of them, but I've seen a few, and there's talk of, like, the kids losing control over their bowels and their bladders and things like that, and how that's like a sign of them being evil, and just terrible stuff, as opposed to, I don't know, maybe a sign of the fact that they are under immense stress because they're being abused. It's wild. So it's interesting that she uses that as a metaphor, given how much she's written about those kinds of things coming up in her own kids in this environment. Also, Alex, thank you so much for the super chat. Thanks. Makes me so mad. So many people could have stepped in and stopped this and didn't. I know 30 years is max, but not long enough, in my opinion. Sorry. I completely understand that. Absolutely understand that. 30 years is a long time. But yeah, in some respects, maybe not, maybe not long enough. I don't know.
You know, you get a 6-year-old who knows they're supposed to be in the toilet and they're peeing down the heater vent. They're going to try to hide it. And that's when I realized she knew all along, and she's hiding it. And then I was like, crap, what am I done? And that's when things kind of started turning. I was like, she's not been honest. I didn't know she wasn't honest. I didn't know she would lie. And it's like, what else has she been lying about? Where else have I been deceived? What was that?
Oh, no, I was just, agreeing.
Yeah.
You did see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was just like the little string that started pulling apart the fabric. I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like what?
Let me do a poll really quick, 'cause I want to know what you guys think. Okay. Here's a poll. Do you think Ruby genuinely had a realization of being brainwashed by Jody, or is she lying? I'm very curious. So, lying would be no. I'm sorry. I should have clarified that. So yeah, do you think she had a genuine realization of being brainwashed? Actually, you know what? Maybe I should redo that poll. I'm sorry, guys. I want to make sure that this is clear. Although I think you guys probably understand. Okay, hang on. Okay, we're gonna redo this. I know a bunch of people already answered. Okay, genuine lying. Okay, there we go. Now that's more clear. Okay, do you think Ruby genuinely had a realization of being brainwashed by Jody, or is she lying? So genuine versus lying. Yeah. Taka Day. The or is she lying makes it no longer a yes or no question. Yeah, that's why I changed it. Okay. So, okay. Let's continue on with this conversation while you guys continue to answer that poll. But so far it's a lot of folks. It's just around just under 100 votes, and so far the vast majority of people are saying that she's lying. And I guess before we continue on, while we're paused, Sandy, thank you so much for gifting 10 Legalbytes memberships. Very, very kind and generous of you to do that once again. So Angela Eric Newman, insert funny name. That is a funny name. Vicky with an I, D Price, Ohio Palm Mom, Madeline, Chelsea Ellen, Carolyn V, Jeannie Armenta, Denise M. And I think that's the last one. You all have been gifted memberships by Sandy. So welcome back to Bite Club. Very happy to have you guys here. I hope you can make it to our members only live stream, normally on Fridays at 10 a.m. This week it's on Thursday at 10 a.m. All right.
But I can talk about it now. Yeah, go ahead.
Lamar was just very, very kind that day that we met with him. It was very kind to visit with us.
Oh, like miraculous.
Yeah. He ends his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had a way of like he didn't beat around the bush. Like there were sometimes he would say things that were shocking to me. Like he would like repeat what I said, but he would say it in a different tone so I could hear myself. And he's like, "Is that really what you think?" And I'm like, "Oh." And he would, but then there were other times that
you have 1 minute remaining for this call.
Do you want to end the call, or do you want me to call you back? How do you want to?
We can end for today, and then we can always talk again. So
yeah,
I'm just really glad that he's there to kind of help you through it. And
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that first night I was in the jail, I just felt really strongly like, I'm sending you help. Help is coming.
Yeah.
And I just felt like that was Lamar, and he's been very, very helpful. I'm grateful for him.
Really quick here. Nick Wilson, member for 18 months. Thank you so much for being a member, a supporter of the channel. She's a well-versed liar. It's far too natural to her. I know a lot of folks are saying the same thing. Genergy, Alita, will you be streaming the actual trial? Well, this one, they both pled guilty, so there's not going to be a trial for either of them. So this is where we're at. We're kind of just sort of like visiting all of the information that just recently came out in this case. I don't know if there's going to be any other charges against any other people involved in connections. Like there's this woman, Pam, that's been talked about a number of times, who also worked with them, who also, I think, had a hand in abusing the kids from what it sounds like. So, there's that. And then there's also been the question of like, what about Kevin? Is he ever going to be charged for anything? But we're going to go through his interviews as well, and that's going to be interesting to look at for sure. Haunted Shadows Legacy, who is Lamar? Lamar is her attorney. So that's Ruby's attorney.
That's what we've all been praying for this whole time. So I'm glad that even it's a different kind of help, but I'm glad it's finally here.
Me too. Me too.
Okay. That's the end of that one. Now, we are going to go back to this article here, and we're going to go through this interview with, so there are two interviews with Kevin Franke. The first one is the day that Ruby and Jody were arrested, and he shows up at the police station, and they have this interview with him, and he kind of learns like what has happened and what's going on. Then there's a second interview where he comes back. I don't know the date of the second interview, but this is a bit later, and it's very, very interesting to hear how he has changed in the way that he's talking to the police. So let's first go through this one. I know a lot of folks in the chat, saying Kevin's just as bad as Ruby. He's just as complicit. So yeah, it's interesting though to see how the police regard him, and how they, how they get information from him as well. Okay. So this one's a 45-minute video, but we're going to do it at 1.25 speed. So, okay. So it should be a little bit faster. The other one is also like 45 minutes.
So, I'm going to read the Miranda rights before we start.
Hey, we've got some Miranda rights being read.
We're just going to kind of ask you a few questions about your involvement. Okay. So first, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held against you in the court of law. Okay. You have the right to an attorney.
So we got the first two elements of a Miranda warning. You have the right to oh, dang it, the balloons. It's because I put two fingers up. We've got the first one. You have the right to remain silent. Number two, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. What is next?
Attorney, or to have him or her
Sorry. Let me go back for a second. Dang it. Okay.
So, I'm going to read the Miranda rights before we start. We're just kind of ask you a few questions about your involvement. Okay. So first, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held against you in the court of law. Okay. You have the right to an attorney, or to have him or her present while questioning. If you cannot afford to hire one will be hired to represent you.
Okay. So then number three was you have the right to the presence of an attorney. And then number four is if you cannot afford one will be appointed for you. Yeah, Mountain Princess 207. You were just celebrating the Miranda rights. Yes. I was celebrating the police properly giving a Miranda warning. Alex, also thank you so much for the super chat. I know in each state is different, but at what age can a child have a voice to say where they want to live? I think that is so I don't know particularly. at what age they start considering that as a factor. I'm pretty sure it starts pretty young though, but I know Rob from Law and Lumber would of course be able to give an answer, at least as to Virginia. But yeah, the kids, generally speaking, like they're able to give an opinion as to like where they want to go. That's usually some kind of a factor, so long as they are old enough. I just don't know specifically what age that is, so I'm sorry for not giving you a clearer answer on that. Let's see here. Okay. And I think that was okay. Yeah, okay. Let's continue with the interview here.
If you decide to answer questions, you can stop at any time. Okay. Do you understand your rights?
I do.
Okay. Do you wish to speak to me now?
Well, I want to pick up my kids.
Okay, so and to wrap up the Miranda rights, the Miranda warning, I should say, she said, "Do you understand?" "Yes, I do." "Do you want to continue?" And he says, "Well, I want to pick up my kids." But so they're going to have to sort of shore up that last question there.
We're going to ask you some questions, and if you don't want to answer them, you just say, "Hey, man, I'm not going to answer that."
Sure.
And just say, "Hey, I'm not going to talk. That's not beneficial to you," and then we're done. We're nowhere. Sure. You understand that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so just for starters, what was your full name?
Kevin William Franke.
How to spell that?
KEVIN WILLIAM FRANKE.
And what's your date of birth?
So date of birth, this is personal information that
That's a good address for you.
that they have muted, so to protect his confidentiality. Also, I think there was a question in the chat about it, but a question about Miranda rights. It comes from the landmark United States Supreme Court case, Miranda v. Arizona, where there was an issue about this sort of thing. And the Supreme Court laid out the elements of what exactly the police have to do when you have someone who is both in police custody. In other words, they've been told by the police they're not allowed to leave, and they are being questioned by the police. So, what triggers it, and what the police have to do, and all this kind of stuff. So that's why we call it Miranda rights, is because those elements come from the court opinion in that case.
For you.
I'm not comfortable giving my address right now.
Okay, but you do live in Springville?
I do.
How long have you lived in Springville for?
I moved there in 2007 with my family, so
okay. And how many?
17 years.
17. And how many kids do you have, Kevin?
I have 6 kids.
And what are their names?
Names are being redacted. You got a lot of kids.
Some of them are teenagers, 2 adults. Yeah.
So are they all living with you, or?
No, I haven't seen them for over a year.
Any of them?
I haven't seen them in over a year, he says. Also, Kelly D wants to know, do you know what year that Miranda laws were adopted? Well, it's actually constitutional. It comes from the Constitution, but Miranda was decided in 1966. So there have been a number of cases that have followed since then, that the Supreme Court has clarified what the right and left limits are, what the police have to do, what the police don't have to do. But 1966 was when that landmark case came out. But it comes from the Constitution, from the Fifth Amendment.
Any of them?
No, none of them.
For a year?
Over a year.
Okay.
I've been in a separation.
From who?
From my wife and family.
What's your wife's name?
Ruby.
Ruby. When's the last time you saw Ruby?
The last time I saw her was the 18th of this month. We met she requested me to sign over vehicles, or the titles to the vehicles. The vehicle that she drives were all in my name.
When's the last time you physically?
So that was 12 days before, because he's talking to them on the 30th. He says it was the 18th was the last time he saw her in person. She asked to transfer over title to the vehicles from his name over to hers. So that was almost 2 weeks before that he saw her.
Physically saw Russell or Eve?
The day that I moved out, July 24th, 2022.
24th of 2022.
Or July 25th, July 25th.
So it's my understanding that at least home here in Kanta and Ivans, have you been to that home?
No.
You've not been to that home?
No, I don't know. I don't know what's anything that's been going on.
Like, this is good, man. Like, I would love to be able to help you out with this, and like, I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, because I'm unaware of your involvement in what's really going on. So for you to say that you're unaware of the status of your kids kind of makes, I know that sounds kind of crummy to you, but it sounds kind of good to me. Like, who lives in that home with your, is it ex-wife? Is it currently a separated wife? Like, who lives in that home with your children?
To be honest, I don't know. I know that she's there with 4 of the children, and our 2 older children has moved out.
I know this response has drawn a lot of criticism for him. I definitely know that, and I share in a lot of that criticism, right? Because you don't even know who's in that house with your wife and your kids. Like, come on, man! Like, that's nuts. Like, in hindsight, we know who was there and what was happening, but any number of things could have been happening, and he had absolutely no idea.
They're not at your home in Springville? And I'm not trying to trip you up. I can see you're hesitant to talk to me. I understand that.
Well, where I live, no, I haven't seen them for over a year.
Okay. That's tough. I can only imagine how that feels, man. I got kids, and not seeing them for that long, that would tear a little piece of my heart out.
Of age to drive. Does she drive?
I don't know.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't nothing that's going on
So-
in their lives or anything going on.
How did you find out that you needed to come here to 55 North Main Street?
I received a message that I needed to come pick up my kids from the police department in Highlands.
And who was that message from?
Well, I prefer not to say right now.
It would just help us a lot.
I'm trying to figure out who reached out to you, because it makes sense that would happen. I'm just not aware of anyone who did that from our department.
Right, and I'm not comfortable saying right now who reached out to me.
Okay.
So
It is interesting that he doesn't want to say who alerted him to the fact that the kids needed to be picked up from the PlayStation.
you haven't seen any of your kids in over a year, you said?
That's correct.
And then, what was the last time you saw her? How old is she now?
15.
She's 16. Okay. And then when all the kids left, Ruby took all of them?
Yeah, she stayed in the house and I moved out.
Okay. And did you ever try to reach out to the kids, drop by the home, or was there?
I honored the separation boundary that we agreed to.
So what was your separation?
Contact boundary, excuse me.
Did you have a no contact order in place?
Order? No, this was between my wife and I.
So what did Ruby ask of you when you separated?
What did she ask of me?
Did she ask you not to contact the kids?
Ruby invited me to leave the home.
Mm-hmm.
Such a weird way to put it. Ruby invited me to leave the home. An invitation is usually like a call to decrease distance, right? But he's using invited to describe increasing distance between two people. It's so weird. It's a very strange way of putting it. It's like you invite someone to join you in an activity or to join you in something. But he says she invited me to leave, which is just weird. Vicky with an I, who's his lawyer, the same as Ruby's? I actually don't know who his lawyer is. My guess is probably not the same, because the two he had some potential criminal risk here in this case as well, being the father of the kids who have been horrifically abused. And this is the kind of situation where a conflict could very quickly arise between him and Ruby. So I think that there would be a potential conflict of interest that would necessitate having two different attorneys. Oh, Madeline, they're getting divorced as well. That I wasn't certain about, but interesting. Okay. Let's continue.
While I thought about the choices that I've made in my life and the way that I treated her,
Okay.
and so I left.
And how long had you and Ruby been married before?
We were married in 2000.
So about 22 years?
When we separated, we were going on 22 years. Yes.
Okay. And during your marriage, how was disciplining your kids? How would you discipline your kids?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay, that's fine.
Have you been since separated or since they lived here in the city of Ivins? Have you communicated with your wife regarding like disciplining with your kids or their care or their physical well-being?
Ooh, good question by the cop. Have you communicated with her about disciplining the kids or their care or their well-being, basically like how they should be raised? In other words, what the cop is looking for is, has he possibly been giving some sort of instruction to Ruby as to how the kids should be disciplined, or did she learn something from him, or are they in agreement? Does he know about what's going on and he's not doing anything about it? This is important information for the cops to ascertain as to Kevin, so that they can determine how they treat him moving forward. Is he to be treated as a potential defendant, or is he to be treated as a witness? Those could be two different things. What's his answer?
No.
So is she doing this on her own, just telling you how your kids are?
She's not telling me anything about the kids.
Who's this?
She hasn't said anything about the kids. And now, of course, this draws a lot of criticism too, which is like, did you ever ask about the kids? Did you ever like try to figure out how they're doing? Were you concerned about them? Did you even care about them? I've seen a lot of criticism about that as well.
Who's this female Jody that your wife was? Do you know a female named Jody?
She is a therapist and a life coach, I know, and she's.
Do you respect her?
Do I respect her?
Also a good question. Do you respect Jody? Who is Jody? Do you respect her? Also very interesting, because respect can mean a number of things. So, what's his answer, and what's is he going to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think she's a very honest, truthful person. Yes.
Okay. You place value on Jody?
I don't know what that means.
Like, do you value what she says and how she treats? Is your wife a client of hers? Is your wife a partner of hers? Is your wife a roommate with her? If your kids are living in her house, is what I'm trying to say.
I'm not aware of that, but I know that they've been in business for the last year filming.
Who's they?
Ruby and Jodi. They
Ruby
film
and Jodi.
They film podcasts, and so every week a podcast goes up and I listen to it.
What's the name of it?
Connections with an X.
It's interesting. So he's been estranged he's been invited to leave by Ruby, which I do believe is probably the language that Ruby actually used. It's very euphemistic. Is how I would put that language, the invited to leave language. But it's interesting that he is still like listening to the podcast, even though he's been put out.
Like CONNEXIONS.
Yeah.
And then, do you support them in that role and doing that and having?
Do I support them in the business?
Yeah, like do you support them and think that what they're doing is a good thing, or?
Yeah, I support their business efforts. I think it's a good thing.
Are you involved with their business efforts, or?
No.
So just Ruby and Jody. No
In the business?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And were you involved in the 8 passengers account with your family?
Yes. I was in the videos, if that's what you mean.
I briefly learned about this 2 hours ago.
So did Ruby more so do the videos for the family?
Mm-hmm.
And how long did you guys do that for?
She started the channel in 2015, and as far as I'm aware, from the time I left, the last video she uploaded was towards the end of 2021.
Okay.
And again, I'm not aware of anything she's done since our separation. I don't visit the passengers anymore.
Chapter of your life that's gone.
It's a past chapter, yeah.
So how do you and Ruby communicate? Just through text, phone call?
So it's interesting because they indicate that they know about 8 passengers. They know about his involvement in it. And so they want to ask him more about his involvement behind the scenes and whatnot. So, my guess is certainly by the time that they got to sentencing, that the police definitely would have seen, if not all of their videos, a lot of their videos, and kind of combed through that stuff to look for further evidence of potential abuse. So it is interesting to me that given that they still didn't pursue charges against Kevin, it indicates that either they thought that the actions that were displayed on the channel weren't enough, or that there just wasn't enough to pin the content onto him. So it's interesting.
Our text, and if there's anything considered an emergency, we agree to communicate through a phone call.
Okay. And do you know her phone number off the top of your head?
The top of my head, no.
Okay, no worries. So how often would you guys communicate while she was down here?
Well, I don't know how often or long she was down here. We've communicated maybe 4 times in 2023 since January.
So are you aware of how she disciplines?
And at this point, it's August. So in what, 8 months, he's communicated 4 times with Ruby. It's not a lot.
Kids, or how she handles the kids with behavioral issues or anything like that?
No.
So you're unaware of how she does that?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of the physical condition of your children?
No.
That also is an important question, because how much did he know about what was going on? What's their physical condition? Do you know? Do you know? He says no. Whether he's being truthful or not, of course, is another consideration. But this is what he's saying in the moment to the police.
No, I've chosen to trust my wife with the children. That was part of the agreement of our separation.
Is that you allow her to physically provide for the needs of the child? You're just removed from that, or you pay support? I know this is personal questions, but
No, yes, my job is to financially provide for
I'm just trying to figure out like, how much of a role do you play in the caretaking of specifically, is it Russell and Eve, of those 2 kids?
I pay the bills.
Okay.
With my job, I provide the money, goes into a shared bank account, and that's my only involvement.
Okay.
That's his involvement in the family. He says is just paying the bills, making sure that the family is provided for financially.
There's a whole bunch of things I want to talk to you about, but I still can't get over the fact that someone notified you to come here to pick up your kids. My guess is, was that Jody?
No, I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay.
All I'll say is,
well, you said you trusted
me.
her. You said that you think that she's not. I asked you if you placed value on her, but you obviously.
She is an honest. I know her to be an honest and a trustworthy individual. So, yeah, I trust her.
Interesting. I know her to be an honest and trustworthy individual, so I trust her. He sounds very distant when he says that. Maybe that's his overall demeanor. This is the first time that we see him talking, of course. I mean, unless you've seen him on the 8 Passengers channel. I haven't watched enough to see him. I think it's mostly been Ruby and the kids. But yeah. Kristen, thanks so much for the super chat. Kay was defending their parenting choices in videos. Yeah. he does talk about that a bit in this video too, in this interview.
And I received a communication that.
So this is redacted.
And so I left immediately from my job and drove down here. That's all I know. I've come to pick up my kids and to take them home with me.
Yeah, is there custodial paperwork that says that you're like there's no custodial paperwork denying you of rights, correct?
There's no custodial paperwork at all.
Period. So the kids are yours.
They are mine.
Okay.
Yes. This wasn't just a verbal agreement between my wife and I when we said it last year.
Well, what questions do you have?
Oh, I want to know what's going on and why I was asked to come down and pick up my two kids.
Well,
and a lot of that kind of hinges on who asked you, because if we had been the one, like, I'm not going to say you fit, but I'm confident I didn't call you because we wouldn't have wanted you down here at this point in our investigation. So, having said that, I think it's time we be honest with you, right?
Sure. No, and I didn't lie.
Sure,
someone contacted me, but I don't want to say without
from your office. But okay.
So he's still pretty firm about not wanting to say who contacted him to come and pick up his kids.
I recall saying something from my office.
Our office.
No.
Someone, yeah. So we don't know who called you. So if we knew who called you, then we could help you.
It would make more sense.
But
well, I don't know the legal ramifications of implicating individuals who contacted me. And so without a lawyer here, I don't want to answer that question.
that's okay. But you want.
So that is an example of a person in an interview, a custodial interview situation, because although he's not under arrest, he is, I think at one point there's a reference to the fact that he wasn't allowed to leave or something like that. And he, this is a custodial interview situation where he says, I don't want to talk about that without a lawyer present, but he's totally happy and willing to talk about other stuff outside of that particular issue. So that's an example of someone sort of drawing a boundary around a particular subject that they want to have a lawyer present for a conversation, but they're totally willing to go outside of that.
You want to know specifics of the case, which we can't share right now because it's under investigation. So
I see.
Yeah, so we would like to ask questions about where you found out, but we'll respect that if you don't want to share that information. But I am curious, when you guys had the previous 8 Passengers YouTube channel, you guys got a lot of heat for neglect and child abuse. A lot of people commented those things on there. Why were they commenting those things?
That's a good.
Interesting question. Why were people commenting about, you guys abusing your children when you were running the 8 Passengers YouTube channel? What is his response?
That's a good question. We had a son who was acting out in very selfish behavior.
Just Chad, or
yes, this was Chad, and none of this is strange or odd. You could get on YouTube and find out all sorts of stuff on this.
It's like a double-edged sword.
The question is, what do you believe, right?
Yeah.
There was even an article written in Newsweek magazine in 2020 on it, or was it Newsweek? No, Business Insider, where we were interviewed, and we were pretty straightforward, and we talked about it, and we shared our piece in that. Basically, it boils down to he was being very cruel and mean to his siblings that he shared a room with, and so we removed him from the room, and we said, you can sleep anywhere you want. Sleep on the couch, sleep on the pull-out bed, sleep on the floor for all we care, but you're not sleeping in that room with your brother. He chose to sleep on a beanbag. So
this is really interesting to see this sort of like relay of what happened. So if you're not familiar, what happened was there was something that got out was the fact that one punishment that they had for one of their kids was he wasn't allowed to sleep in his own bed for over 6 months or something like that. And they were punishing him because he did something. And so here he's describing it as, he was being very selfish and he was acting out against his brother. Kids will do selfish things. adults will do selfish things. It is very strange that like that this seems to be a big criticism here within this family. It gets repeated a number of times, is this idea of selfishness, which if you talk to like I have a friend who is she's an art therapist in a school, and I remember when she was in grad school for psychology, she was talking about how there was a difference between like first year psychology grad students and like last year psychology grad students in terms of like how they viewed selfishness. Whereas like the first years would be like, would say that selfishness is inherently a bad thing, that like you shouldn't be selfish. But the ones like at the tail end of grad school would be like, no, selfishness is a good thing because it means that you are considering your boundaries, you are considering how you are being treated, you are considering your needs and all of this kind of stuff. So selfishness actually can be a good thing. It's very interesting to me that selfishness is something that comes up a number of times within this family as like the big critique. Like you are doing something that is being selfish. You are considering yourself above others, which is just very interesting to me because it just seems like another way of looking at that could be potentially, this is I'm generalizing a bit because there's probably a lot of different contexts in which it was used, but in some contexts I could see that also being like a criticism of you are putting up too many boundaries as a human being, as an autonomous human being, and we don't like that, and so we are going to punish you for that. It's very interesting that comes up a lot. So I don't know in this case if selfishness means someone who is improperly, like being what most reasonable people would see as like selfish behavior. Like, for example, cutting in front of a line at the airport, right? Like, and just like not giving any sort of justification. Like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm about to miss my plane. My gate is closing. I've got to try to make my plane. Can I please cut in front of everybody? You're like, that's fine. But like the guy that's just like, no, I just don't want to wait in this line and cuts in front of everyone. Like that kind of selfish behavior. Or is this something where it's like, there's behavior that is otherwise maybe healthy and appropriate, but is being labeled as selfish because it is, showing some kind of a boundary or something like that. It's interesting to me. It's just interesting to me. Okay, let's continue.
So 9 months later, he had made a lot of changes in his life, and he was ready to, and we had moved by that time. And so we had a new house, and he was ready to move into his own bedroom. Made a video about it, and in the video, he mentioned something to the effect of, I've been sleeping for 9 months on a beanbag. And that is what all the uproar was about.
What did you guys do?
Yeah, appropriately so. Appropriately so. Apple Jammin' PB, thank you so much for this context, because this I had seen so many videos about this, but I didn't know exactly what it was that he had done. So assuming this is correct, of course. I don't have time to fact check this particular chat, but I'm gonna run with it. In this specific instance, their oldest son filmed himself telling their youngest son that they were going to Disneyland as a prank. If that's true, that's okay. Sure, that's mean. That's that's something that for a moment there, the other kid is going to be really upset about because of the hello. Because that's, you're getting pumped up about something really exciting only to be let down. Oh, did he say so in the video? I'm so sorry. Then it's been a minute. Okay, but there's other corroboration here that's correct. Okay. So that is insane to me that warranted him not having his room. Also, that's not selfish behavior. That's not selfish behavior. That's I mean, okay, I guess you could classify it as selfish because it's like you're putting your own personal entertainment above, kindness towards others, but like that's strange to label that behavior as selfish. So, yeah, wild. And that seems like the punishment is way bigger than the crime in that sort of situation. Yeah, D Price, that's just having siblings. Yes, some discipline, but geez. Yeah, right? I mean, anyone who grew up with siblings understands that kind of experience, right? Especially if you are one of the younger kids in the family. like me. Like those things happen, right? You get teased, you get tricked, you get all of that kind of stuff when you're a younger sibling. But like the idea that you lose your bedroom, you lose your bed, you have to sleep on a beanbag for like 6 months or however many months you have to sleep on it. That's insane.
Did it help like with his behavioral issues? Is that something you and Ruby talked about together? And then did you?
And this is all redacted, by the way, for confidential.
Helping you discover yourself and fix behavioral issues and things like that. Is that something you and Ruby sought out to help correct like some of the things?
Yes, and I supported it. And so together we held boundaries for our son Chad to support his choosing honest and responsible choices. And when he chose honest and responsible choices consistently is when he began to get his privileges back. And that was the other word, right?
Yeah.
And so, but yes, through 2000.
So more redaction here. That's why there's no sound. So this is a bit of a longer redaction here.
Contact with him because I'm honoring the contact separation boundary with that I agreed to with my wife. But I understand that he's 18, living on his own somewhere in Provo and working and supporting himself.
What other kids went down to visit Jody?
What other kids?
Yeah, did you send any of the other kids down to spend time with Jody?
We didn't send Chad down to spend time with Jody. They would meet on Zoom.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we were in spring stuff. Well, even in 2019, we would meet with.
So when did Ruby and Jody, to your knowledge, like decide to collaborate, come together, and mesh lives? Because that's what's happened.
Mesh life.
They decided to start a business in 2021.
So he's bringing it back to Jody and her involvement with Ruby and sort of them working together. And so it's interesting because they've up to this point, the police have really sort of just let him talk, let him explain, sort of ask questions that are probing, but they're not overly invasive. And so this is so far it's a pretty calm conversation. And I think the police are doing a good job of asking some important questions here so far. But that does change at one point. And I think it might be coming up soon, but you can tell that he's bringing it back to Jody. What Jody's involvement. What happened? What's happened more recently?
While you and Ruby were together.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but there were at that period it was pretty nebulous. I don't know.
What's that word mean?
It was just a lot of talk and everyone like solid plans. It was let's start by doing podcasts together. And then that's all I know. I know that
So he's talking about the beginnings of the conversation between Jody and Ruby about what their business venture together would look like. So he said it's really started pretty nebulous, pretty fluid, not really not really anything concrete, just kind of started with maybe a podcast idea and we'll go from there. That's all I really know.
They published a book together recently. You can find on Amazon.
Published a book together. Okay.
Was the business thriving? Like life was good between those two?
Well, not that I was aware.
Well, at some point, and again, I'm not digging into your life, but I'm trying to understand this. At some point,
they kick you out. When you talk about a business, thriving in terms of business and money, when we stopped 8 passengers in YouTube, we lost 90% of our income. So we said that business was thriving. In my perspective, no. I don't think it ever was. After that.
Was that part of your guys' reason for separation after you guys ended 8 passengers?
Question.
Was that part of the reason? The reasons are because of ways that I treated my wife, and some of my own addictions that I was working through and seeking help on with pornography.
Thank you for sharing that.
And I've made some wonderful progress.
Like, is that something you came to the realization that you needed help and weren't doing things right? Or is that something that like Jody helped you guys recognize that maybe Ruby needed more? I'm trying to understand her involvement in your guys' life. She's my focus, so just be honest.
I understand, and I can perceive that. Jody and Ruby have a close relationship, and Jody saw the need for me to get help, and frankly, I agree. The space has been exactly what I need to face, my own addictions and receive the support and help that I've needed. And so this space has been very, very good for me.
So when you stated that you and Ruby had this no contact that you guys just verbally agreed upon, was that an idea given by Jody that she recommended you guys have that space and not contact one another?
I'm not aware of that. The invitation for me to leave and take space was from my wife.
Interesting. So the question was, was that Jody's suggestion that you sort of take that space between the two of you, so that you could go and, get help and improve or whatever? And he said, no, and again, he phrases it as the invitation to leave was given by my wife. So of course, it could very well be that Jody was the one that told Ruby, you've got to do this, or you should do this. And then Ruby then, relays that to Kevin. That's entirely possible, but who knows?
But that was while Jody and Ruby were friends and collaborating and doing podcasts, and sure.
One thing that is interesting to me is the fact that he doesn't, unlike Ruby, he doesn't self-victimize in the situation. In fact, he takes a lot of responsibility for their marriage not being in a good place. It seems like he takes all the responsibility on himself. Whether that is, accurate or not, of course, is another matter, which the second interview, I think, informs a bit of that, to see like what was going on in that house, at least according to what Kevin says, if you believe him and what he says in the second interview. Yeah. Anyway, so but it is interesting here that he seems to have completely capitulated as to who was at fault in that in the relationship.
Well, you're the custodial parent of this child. I don't see why we can't explain to you why we're involved. So I don't recall the exact time, but sometime before 11 o'clock today, we received a phone call from 911 on our dispatch that a 12 to 13-year-old boy was knocking on doors in a neighborhood asking for food and water, that he was severely emaciated.
Interesting to watch his behavior here as he listens to what was going on and why, like basically why he's there.
That he had
what is emaciated?
Skinny, scrawny, malnutrition, not enough food, not enough water to sustain life. So he had.
I'm sorry, what?
He had duct tape on his extremities, on his hands, on his ankles, and those were covering rope burns that were used to tie him down. Take a second.
It was one thing that was interesting was the fact that he just sort of he like blinks several times, kind of leans forward a little bit, like almost like disbelieving the words that he just heard.
And think about what I just said. That's the condition of your son. Given that information, your son was taken to the hospital. A warrant has been applied and granted by the Department of Child and Family Services to remove both Russell and Eve from your wife's care. So no one right now is going to have access to these two children based on their physical condition. Do you understand that?
I understand.
Would you condone that behavior?
Very important question. Very important question. You know, I know there's a lot of reactions to his reaction, right? People, it's very subtle, you could say, or some people would say he's lacking in reaction to this news that his son had to be hospitalized because he's malnourished, and has all kinds of other wounds and bruises and rope burns and things like that. But this question right here is very, very important. And you can tell the tone of the cop also changed as he's describing all of this, like he's getting angry as he's talking about it. And then he ends with, do you condone this behavior? Like his tone as he asks that sounds very much like like almost like you better not condone this behavior. But that's an important question, like I said, because this is important to know, like, does this guy think that this is okay? Hearing this, does this like fit in line with what he thinks should be happening to his children in his house under his roof, even though he's not there under his roof?
Would I condone that behavior?
That's my job. My job is to find out your knowledge of the treatment of these
based on your
precious
description,
children.
no. But again, I don't know the details, or I don't know what's going on. But as you described that sounds
horrible, disgusting.
It is interesting that there's a part of him, it sounds like, that he's like, well, I don't know if there are circumstances that justify that, you know, or something, you know. I guess on some level I can understand. I'm usually someone myself who is slow to react to things. That's just sort of my MO, like my brain processing sometimes is just a little bit slower. At least the outward appearance of reactions to things sometimes. And so I can understand someone in this situation being like, wait, maybe there's some sort of circumstance that explains what's happening a little bit better. But then again, like, it is kind of wild that he reserves that. Like, even as someone who kind of reacts a little bit slowly to things sometimes, I think that's a little bit strange to not be like, what do you mean? Like, what, like, of course not. Of course I don't condone any of that. That's horrifying. Like who did this to my child, and where can I go to hurt them? You know, like this is that's more of the response that I think a lot of people would be looking for in a case like this.
No human being should be treated like that.
Yeah, okay.
That's my thoughts, but again, we might be different on that. We're gonna sit here for a second, okay? We're gonna go out and talk. I'm not saying you're still not free to go. Are you under arrest? Absolutely not. We just have lots of questions.
We have lots of questions.
Okay, because
your children are under medical care right now.
And what does that mean?
It means that you don't have access to them. My understanding is that they are, what is that?
They're in the custody of DCFS.
And they will be for the next 70.
There's a medical hold on them right now. So for at least the next 72 hours, based on our understanding.
At least the next 70.
They're in observation. They're being watched.
DCFS is going to provide you that information, and they can better answer your questions along those lines. That's handled through them. Okay. So we'll be back.
So I want you to think about some things, though.
I
don't know. Listen to me. Listen to me. I want you to think about that for a minute. So I have no idea where they're at.
Oh, I don't either. But
okay, we're gonna hop out here. We'll be back in a minute. Okay. That's still recording audio and video. Okay. So if you would, don't make any phone calls.
Sure.
Okay, and here he's going to sit in silence by himself for a bit and sit with a face palm. So I'm going to fast forward, you know, okay, and then he changes position a little bit. But we're going to go ahead and skip ahead. Yeah, and that officer definitely whoops, that officer definitely, as soon as he got to the point of informing him as to like what was happening with the kids, what had happened to the kids, yeah, like you could tell, like it's just his anger just came right out of his chest. Let's see. Get a little further
What's
up.
going to happen?
Okay. All right, here we are. All right.
What's going to happen to my wife? I love my wife.
I don't know. I'm being honest.
And so this is still the first interview. This is like I guess we could call this the second part of the first interview. And after this, we're going to get to the second interview.
I don't know. That had to do with
I don't have charges against my wife.
possibly. I think given the circumstances, that's highly appropriate, but again, I don't know your wife. I was hoping to gain some insight from you, but I don't necessarily know that that's something you wanted to.
I trust her.
A road you wanted to travel down with me, so.
And not without legal representation.
Yeah, all right, I get it.
But I love my wife. I trust my wife. And so, I mean, this feels like getting run over by a steam truck while you're sharing with me today.
Interesting. Like the first statement felt weird when he says, you know, I love my wife, because it just feels like why aren't you talking about you love your kids, right? Like, what about your kids who are in the hospital right now? I definitely understand people's outrage if, you know, at a statement like that. And then he says, I love my wife, I trust my wife. I feel like I've been like steamrolled or railroaded or something like that, you know, by all of this. Basically like thinking like he's been blindsided by all of this information that she could do this to their children. But it is interesting.
Yeah, I can tell you're caught off guard.
I thought I was just coming here to pick up my kids, and for what, I don't know what or why, but that's fine.
That also is interesting because it seems to suggest that he thought that they had done something wrong. Like his assumption was his kids had done something wrong and were picked up by the police, and he had to pick them up from the police station. That seems to be his impression, which is interesting.
So I am taking them back with me and just.
I mean, I'd love to have a candid conversation with you. I just don't know how it's going to be received by you. I don't know you, but I can tell you my perception of how this happened.
Well, I'm interested in facts. Look, I'm interested in facts, but at the same time, I'm interested in all the facts.
But you understand our facts. Our facts are that you have a child that is emaciated,
Malnourished, but yeah.
and has marks. I didn't spend any time with her. Sergeant Tobler did.
Did any of you spend time with her?
I
have not.
She was requested to go to the hospital along with Russell, based on her condition.
Folks, I don't know what to do. Like, I want this. You realize that I have a picture of my family on my wall, and I look at it every day, and I work every day, so I can get back to my family and save my family. And everything you're sharing to me just sounds like a made-up story. Like I have no idea what you're talking about. Like,
this is the most emotional that he's gotten so far. You know, his face is turned red. He seems like he's a little bit weepy. He slams his hand on the table. It is interesting. That he you know, he's like, I've been trying to work hard every day, looking at a, you know, at a photo of my family, trying to get back to save my family, which is interesting to say the least.
this it's just, it sounds like a horror movie. And I get you're all doing your jobs. I get it. I understand. And this is my life. I just want my kids. I just want my kids. I just want my family.
Now he finally talks about wanting his kids, wanting his family. We're like 40 minutes into the interview and he finally mentions something like this. Interesting.
I don't know what's going on. I don't know why these things that you described happen. I don't know. It's almost like I want to say, I'm sorry, you must have somebody else. Because it's like, am I in the right conference room here? No. That's what I feel like. It's reality. You know, I'm having a hard time accepting this and dealing with this. So you're telling me that you're taking my kids from me. Like, we need to transfer the titles of the car to my name, you know, or we're going to cancel these credit cards and stuff like that. So just stuff related to the finances really is our only communications over the past year. Sure. We've had zero communications regarding the kids. Okay. I've had no reason to believe or think that there was anything going on. For all intents and purposes, I woke up this morning looking at the picture of my family and making my commitment today, as I do every day, that I'm going to live an honest, a virtuous, and a responsible life today. Okay. And what you're sharing with me just feels like a sucker punch.
Just imagine. Brianna, you have questions?
So,
okay.
If I still have a family,
yeah.
And I just I don't know what my plan. My plan is to go to God.
Sure.
And to figure this out.
Right.
And I am just heartbroken for what you all are sharing with me. And I feel responsible.
That phone is from the video. That's not me.
Separating, leaving. It hurts. And I wish I was a better husband.
I'm waiting for him to say, I wish I was a better father. Unless he thinks, you know, in his mind, being a good father is sort of like within the umbrella of being a good husband, right? Like being a good husband means also being a good father.
I know you're all doing your jobs. And I know you all have the best interests of my kids anyway. And I appreciate them.
Thank you. Thanks. That means a lot.
I just want my kids back. I want my family back. a wife back. Okay.
I don't want this to sound rude, Kevin. We've got some things to do, but we're not kicking you out. But the building's closed. Okay. You're gonna be okay, guys. I really am worried about you.
Bar's closed, man. You got to go home. So that's the end of interview number 1. There was a question here that, oh gosh, I did not save it here. Let's see. Baz 80s. Did he have access to the kids? Sorry, I don't know all the ins and outs. He had been estranged for the past year. So everything within the past year, he had seemingly no idea about. This is what he says. Let's see here. Here's also a question from Kelly D earlier. Sherry said she called in concerns about the kids and being left. I wonder if she ever contacted Kevin and said, Dad, check on the kids, and maybe he ignored it. I don't know. I don't know that either, but that would be important information as to his knowledge, right? Because, when we're talking about, potential criminal negligence and allowing something to happen, allowing abuse to happen that you know about, that you were in a position to do something about, you effectively, through your behavior signify that you condone it. Knowledge is a very important factor. So, but it seems as though the police couldn't find enough to pin him, or they figured he was more valuable as a witness. Also, I know that this is a very, very triggering stuff. So I will put up some more trigger warnings and whatnot. Thank you so much, Draco Amy, for the helplines for various countries. So we've got USA, UK, Australia, and Canada, as well as Germany and Greece. So if anybody's having a hard time with this, I completely understand. Take a step back if you need to. Take care of yourself, please. I know this is a tough subject to go through. Okay, we are now at our final piece that we are going to go through here today. This is the second interview, and this is another one from Jessica Danielle's channel, and I'm gonna link her channel in the description as well. Oh, and we've also got Finland now as well. Thank you for that. And for helplines, mental health helplines. Okay, so this is where things get wild. Things get really wild in this interview. There's no video of this one. It's just this still frame from the first interview, but he gets into like Jody maybe being possessed, her being in charge of a cult, essentially. Like, this is where things get very, very strange. And well, let's just get into it. His tone is definitely very different in this interview, and you can tell that he is a bit more open about a lot of things in this one.
Thank you for meeting with us.
Were you there the first?
I was there. I don't think I interviewed with you.
Okay.
Lieutenant Studley was with me
This one again is at 1.25x speed.
first time.
I don't
So
remember a lot.
yeah, you're okay. I don't blame you. It's a lot all at once, and
Usually a long time no see is a good thing when you're dealing with it.
Yeah, but I know that both of my kids have mentioned both of you by names and particularly with you. And
it's a good kid.
Do you guys by chance have a card?
I do.
Once again, the there will be redactions in here, kids' names, personal information, things like that.
In the car,
Okay.
but not
Okay.
on. So I'll grab that for you though.
Okay.
So like I talked to Mr. Kester about, I just want this to be totally ran by you. I won't ask you any questions that are incriminating. We're not looking at you as a suspect or anything like that. We just are more curious of the dynamic and Jody coming into your relationship, your lives. So if you kind of just want to walk us through that on how she came into your lives and then where things started to
Jody, you mean?
or
Jody.
Jody.
You said Julie, but
Oh,
Jody.
Jody.
Jody,
Yeah,
yes.
Jody. Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll ask first. Have you found the pen papers?
The pen papers. So we found quite a bit
They're-
of different
We
journals.
believe they're on the computer, and the rest of them are sealed, like they're trying to mail them off. But we do not have a direct copy of it, no.
Because my understanding was we had purchased as a Christmas present for Jody in 2021 a leather folder that 3 inches thick or whatever, and it had engraved on the leather on the outside the pen papers, and Ruby wrote detailed notes of everything, all interactions with Jody and Pam Botcher from August 2021 until I don't know when.
You're saying something like, is it like a satchel looking leather, or is it more like a binder?
No, it's like I don't even know what to call it. But
it's flat.
It's well, yeah. So
It's
you
just like a
see,
short, because we do have Ruby's journal, which is from those dates that you mentioned.
these things are going to be so. She wouldn't write the stuff she wrote in the pen paper. She would not write in her journal.
Very interesting. So people have been talking a lot about the journal entries and how terrible those are, because she's just talking about not just the things that they did to the kids, but why they did it, because they were evil, and this is them, they have to learn how to not be evil and all of this kind of stuff. The pen papers sounds distinct from the journal entries. And he says that this is supposed to be worse than the journal. This is supposed to be, this is stuff that she would not write in her journal. This was supposed to be secret and whatnot. Yeah, D. Price, pen papers equals the beginning of their cult philosophy. This, you might be right. You might be right about that based on how he describes it. But let's continue on and hear from him.
The stuff she wrote in the pen papers was not intended to be read by anybody until God would decree them to be written as scripture for the whole world to read.
That's just bananas, just absolute bananas. That there's this whole like, I mean, they've been talking from scripture a lot. They've been using a lot of religious language, of course, to with this whole martyr complex and God spoke to me and all this kind of stuff. But now we're getting into like this is where, in my opinion, there's been a lot of talk about them being Mormon. I don't think they're even truly Mormon, according to what gets revealed here. I think that this is them starting a cult and having full belief in that cult.
I believe that's what we have. Because you're saying the pen would be different, correct? It's like
Well, it was just in a thing called the pen papers. So it was, and that's how Ruby referred to those papers. So it described all of the visions and trances and everything that Jody and Ruby went into.
How thick would you say it was?
It was like 3 inches thick or so. And there were hundreds of pages of written documents that Ruby had. And that was given to Jody in 2022 when she left and returned to her home in January. So
this is similar.
Yeah, like it would look like that.
Okay.
that's not the journal that we have. So
I think you're talking. It looks like a satchel.
It's something Jody would not want found.
yeah,
But she wouldn't want to destroy it.
because we didn't find that in the home. We did find an empty one.
I
So
remember saying anything on those empty thing like that.
Yeah.
There was a full thing, but it was
If the empty one says the pen papers on the outside of it, then they emptied it. I don't think
we'll go back through our photos and see if that's because everything in the home was photographed. So.
If you're interested in Pam Botcher, that's going to tie Pam Botcher to all of this. What's in those documents? Okay, so
Can I just interrupt a minute? I'm sorry.
Sure.
This is all, redacted for privacy matters, talking about kids, talking about, I don't know, some sort of something to be treated confidentially.
is it okay to bring the puppies?
Yes, we want the puppies, right?
Okay.
Okay, so why don't you finish here and then call me when you're done? And I'll,
Okay.
Can you let the bailiff know we're in here so she can make some coffee in the morning?
okay, let me see if I can find her.
Okay.
Thank you. In 2018, we were cycling.
Okay, more redaction. Moving on through it, moving on through it. All right. This is quite long.
And that's going to be hard to find in today's world. Good luck. Ruby had a very close friend named Paige Hannah, who lives in Mapleton, who was a massive fan of Connections and Jodi Hildebrandt. In fact, the Hannahs are on the cover of their book. If you've probably seen them. And so Ruby started to speak with Jody towards the end of 2018, early 2019, with the intention of having her be the therapist to Jody. Jody always had a larger interest in communicating with the parents more than with the actual patient, which I always found curious. But her theory was, if you want to help your child, you have to help yourself first, and then you'll know how to help the child. So she spoke with Ruby frequently, and the frequency of their communications ramped up. And then the first conversation that Jody had with Chad was in June of 2019 while we were on a trip to the East Coast. All of her visits with Chad were virtual through Zoom. But she would talk with Ruby on the phone or through Zoom quite frequently. So Jody met with things got really, it got strange around the fall of 2020. The Hannahs were trying to convince and bring Ruby into thank you. Thanks. Into this organization called Connections, and that particularly were focused on things like lust versus love and healthy marriages, happier marriages, happier relationships. She invited me to go to it was like a conference or something held at Thanksgiving Point in Lehigh. And there were like 100 people there, and that was in the fall of 2019, maybe late summer 2019, late summer 2019. And my impression at that time was this is absolute craziness. This is a bunch of man-hating women that are just looking for excuses to tear down their husbands. And I mean, that's what it felt like to me when I was in there. But it was confusing because there were people that I respected a lot that were up on the stage with microphones in hand, giving testimonials of how great this was and how it changed their lives and their marriage, and like the Hannahs were among them, and then
It's it kind of reminds me also of what a lot of people will say when they've fallen prey to like scams or con artists. Like I just was confused because initially I didn't believe it, but then there was this other guy that was like super successful and said that these methods worked and all this kind of stuff. Only later did I realize it was a total Ponzi scheme, and I was at the very bottom of the pyramid. It's like it sounds very, very similar.
And so, yeah, it was confusing. Ruby, then we went on a trip with the Hannahs to the UK in October of 2019. And I swear the whole objective of the trip was to like convince me to get into Connections, because all of them were in it except me. But they made some really eloquent arguments, and I agreed to join a men's group with Jody in January of 2020, and I would do it for 3 months. So I started that men's group in 2020, and the group, I don't know if you've ever been to like an addiction recovery group, but that's what it was. That's what it felt like. I mean, there were probably 10 men in there. It was on Zoom. All of them were like working through various stages of life. was just it was like a 12-step group, but intended just for general like addiction recovery. And I really was like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't belong here. But everyone's like, no, come here. Like, you can learn to have a better like life and a better marriage. And so I thought, okay, whatever. I went through my 3, obligatory 3 months, and I was ready to leave. And then I got challenged to. And then I got challenged to sit down and have a vulnerable conversation with my wife and ask her how my choices have affected her. And, to me, that was like a loaded question. I thought,
This is very interesting. He got challenged to have this conversation with her, basically where he's like confessing to being the problem. Like it is very interesting how I wonder if this has been repeated with other couples in this group, right? Because he talks about how there's a lot of other men in this Zoom group. It's like it sounds to me like this is a very methodical way of sort of like breaking down the structure of a husband and wife together and the dynamics between the two of them to sort of like separate them, work on the one that is maybe the more vulnerable one, and then have them become somehow the more superior one in their relationship so you can manipulate them and they can manipulate them. I don't know. It's just that's kind of what I'm getting from this conversation.
I still didn't see what I'd done or anything that would constitute any form of like, or anything like that. And
also, before we get any further in this conversation, I'm going to end the poll here. The results of the poll. So 459 people voted. Do you think Ruby genuinely had a realization of being brainwashed by Jody, or is she lying? 79% said lying, 20% said genuine. So very, very interesting.
But I did. I took the challenge and I sat down, and for 2 hours, Ruby very emotionally just shared how she felt in our marriage and how the things that I, over 20 years of marriage, asking for, as a husband frequently, or asking her to, or things like that, how that made her feel. And it was really emotional, and it touched me. Like, I didn't realize that she felt so strongly about that she felt so hurt by that. And so I committed that I would really give it a go. And I stayed in the men's group. And so, in that men's group, I met with Jody every week, with the other men that were in the group. And then it got weird because like our marriage felt like it was getting better and stronger. So this was now, summer and fall of 2020. And in addition to that, there was the whole YouTube cancel thing. I don't know how much you guys are even interested or aware of that, but in May of 2020, some videos that Ruby released on that dealt with Chad just blew up in her face. And
so referring to the videos about him sleeping on a beanbag. Very interesting. Also, I wanted to point this out. Jerry Roth, there was an interview with an ex-member who said the exact same things Kevin is saying. Very interesting. Gabrielle George, also, there was a man outside the courthouse saying Jody separated him from his wife and basically became her life partner too. Wild. Very wild stuff. And yeah, Linda Gehrick, weird that he was convinced the problem was him and the kids were convinced they were the problem. I mean, that seems to have been the desired result here. From, assuming he's telling the truth, the way that he's delivering this feels pretty sincere, feels pretty, like he's not trying to lie or manipulate. That's how this sounds. Maybe I'm just being gullible here, but there's nothing here that makes me think, oh, he's being very suspicious. But yeah, I don't know. But this is very interesting to hear this.
And it was all over the news, and hundreds of thousands of TikTokers and all this stuff were just piling on and basically burned down like our YouTube channel. And overnight, like the income went we lost 90% of the income overnight. And
No, that was first interview too.
Was this like which episode was this? Was this the one where they talked about like the beanbag? Okay.
Yeah, and then they started going back and trying to dig and find, and then they find these little nuggets like, oh, look, Eve went to school without a lunch one day, or stuff like that. But it was the beanbag video that really set people off.
And then they go back from there.
Mm-hmm. So at that time, Ruby was really distraught, and she was looking for support. She was looking for someone who would understand her, who would validate her, and she found that in Jody. All the stuff she did with Chad was because of Jody, and so it makes sense that she would go to Jody, for emotional support when she felt like her world was burning down. In the meantime, I felt like our marriage was getting stronger. It felt better. Like we didn't fight as much. And, even though we were having less, it felt more connecting. And it was just, I thought, wow, this is great. Like, this is great. And I was happy to be the guy up on the stage. That started sometime in like late 2020 or the fall of 2020. There'd be a conference, and Ruby would say, I thought we were just attending it, but then she'd say, hey, they wanted us to get up and tell our story, and I'm like, oh, okay, sure. So I get up and just say, like, yeah, I was the guy who said, I think this is a bunch of man-hating, women, but it really has made a difference in my marriage. And it really did. Like, I believed it.
Wow. Like that sounds like the transformation that you would hear about someone in a cult or someone in a scam or someone in, like you start off as a person at the back of the room disbelieving. And then next thing you know, you're on stage saying the things that you heard people say when you first came in the room that very first time and disbelieved it. But now you're like, yeah, man, I'm totally sincere. This has helped and all this kind of stuff. Like this does sound like classic cult experience from other stories that I've heard of other cases.
And so those conferences and stuff, everything continued like that until March of 2021, when after a conference, a connections conference down in St. George, all the inner circle, all the people who were being trained as mental fitness coaches and stuff. So that was Ruby and a bunch of other people and their spouses. We went out to like a dinner afterwards, and that's where Jody really opened up to the women in a private conversation that she believed she was being tormented and haunted by shadow figures every night. And
Okay, this is where things get really weird. This is where things get really weird. So buckle up, guys.
that was spooky, and I don't know exactly what happened, but the Hannahs do. All I know is at some point within a couple days of that, in that month of March, the Hannahs drove down from Mapleton and picked Jody up and brought her back to their home in Mapleton, and she lived for 6 weeks in that home in Mapleton. And this is where, I don't know what happened, but I do know that there's two different sides of stories. They tried to introduce her to a new cult lady that the Hannahs were getting into, so they wanted to merge their cults into one, apparently. And
they refer to it as a cult at the time.
Oh no one in a cult says I'm in a cult.
Right. But from your perspective, it looks
All right.
like two cult leaders merging together.
From where I stand now, absolutely. According to Jody, she was held against her will for 6 weeks. She escaped and got out. According to the Hannahs, after 6 weeks, Jody herself with forks and wanting to and trying to seduce the husband of the family, they kicked her out.
Yeah. Wild. Two very different perceptions of what happened, but that's not the half of it.
I don't know what's the truth record. Maybe a little bit of both. I don't know. But the point is, somewhere around mid-April, Jody was back in her home in Ivans, and she was a hot mess. and she reached out to Ruby for help. And Ruby was always jealous of the Hannahs that they had a better relationship with Jody than she did. Ruby, and this is like goes back to her childhood. She wanted to be the best friend. She wanted to be the most liked. She wanted to be the one that everybody knew. And so
It does check out with her behavior on 8 Passengers and her deciding to start that up in the first place and all of the things that she did with that.
it hurt her that she felt like she was being excluded from what was going on at the Hannah's house. And she'd say, why so many secrets? And the Hannahs would say, it's not secret, it's sacred. And when the time's right, you can know too. So we went down to Jody's house in May of 2021. That was the first time I'd ever been there. And it blew my mind, as I'm sure you have walked in there and gone, how does a therapist live like this? Like, didn't make sense to me. But we were there, and she opened up and talked about, her struggles and what was going on.
His comment about how does a therapist live like this, it makes me wonder if like the house must have been just a total mess when they went to go and see her and Ivan's. Anyway, okay, so then he says that they talk to her, she opens up, they get to know her struggles, what's going on.
And I gotta say, like, I'm a smart guy. I'm an engineer. I've designed and helped build some really big stuff. I'm a college professor. I can't explain some of the stuff that happened while we were there. Like crashes in the basement while we were talking upstairs.
When he so I have watched this once before, obviously. This is how I'm able to say like this is where shit gets wild. When he first says this, the crashes in the basement, it had me thinking of all of the allegations that Jody's niece Jessie has made about Jody. It's talking about all kinds of abuse from like years and years, I think like 15 years prior or something. So my first thought, knowing about those allegations, because Jesse's been on Long Crime a number of times to talk about this kind of stuff. To me, I was thinking like this is somebody who's locked up in the basement, who's being imprisoned by Jody to like, save them, quote unquote, or something like that. But then he goes on.
And plates like in the kitchen just flying off by themselves, like full speed, smashing on the wall and falling to the floor by themselves. I can't explain it, but I saw it with my own eyes, and I don't have any way to explain it other than there's some crazy going on.
Yeah. He's talking about like things animating themselves and flying across the room, like as if there's like Harry Potter with a wand on the other side of the room, like moving them, or somebody telepathically moving things across the room. I told you, this is where things get weird. Things get really weird.
Ruby was convinced that we could intervene and help Jody. I didn't want a thing to do with it. I tried to like get the bishop involved and say, hey, go to like the priesthood and the church and all that stuff. Just go to your support network. But Ruby continued to be like, no, we can help. Like she doesn't want that. Could you imagine like what happened to her reputation if this got out and stuff? Let's help her. So we went down like a couple more times between May and August, but it reached the point where in August, her bishop at the time, a guy named who's down there in Kayenta named Scott Galbraith. He's not our bishop anymore, but I mean, he was going over there like every night, and he'd be there for like 4 hours, and then he'd be like, I'm fighting evil spirits, I'm casting demons out, I'm crazy stuff going on. And finally, he got to the point where he's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, there needs to be some sort of resolution. It was at that point that they said, why don't you take her up to your house?
Like this is the thing that's like wild to me, is like you have a religious figure who does this kind of thing, right? Like this is like whether you believe in exorcisms or not, there are really religious figures, or men and women of the cloth who have certain qualifications to like try to handle these sort of things. It's very strange that that he's like, well, you know, me and the Mormon church behind me, like we haven't been successful, but like you random couple that just happened to know this lady, maybe you can do better. It's very strange. It's very strange. And I completely understand his initial reaction to be like, absolutely not. No way is she getting anywhere near our family. But obviously that's not where things end up.
And I was like, oh, hell no. I don't want this in my house. But I was over the head with it. Like, that's really insensitive. She's done so much to help our family, and you're being selfish, and she has needs, and come on, like, it won't be for long. And so I relented, and I was like, okay, actually, this could kind of be fun. Let's just make it fun. And we'll, like, she needs a vacation, so we'll just go. They drives up the canyon and stuff like that. And it turned into just a crazy house. The moment she showed up at my house, just the weirdest crap started happening. Lights turning on and off, sounds of people walking in walls, and like sounds like footprints going up walls and across the ceiling, and like stuff floating around, and it was weird, and I hated it. And I became the resident. That was the title I came up with myself. I thought it was kind of funny, but it was my job to like go and give her blessings whenever she started to like go into a trance and go into possession, which started to be a lot. And Ruby would go up and check on her. It started like every 4 hours at night, and then it moved every 2 hours at night, then it moved every hour at night, and then at some point Ruby said, you know what, I'm just going to start sleeping in there. And
Bad idea.
If I need you, I'll come down and get you.
Bad idea.
That's kind of weird, but okay. And that was that. They started sleeping in the same bed, and then she started having like trances and stuff. I would say probably September, where she believed that she was going to heaven and seeing God and Jesus and talking with him. And she would get together with Pam Botcher. Ruby, Pam, and Jody would get together and do these interventions. That's what they call them. And so they just go up and lock themselves in a room for 4 or 5 hours, and then they'd come out and they'd all just be on cloud nine. And Ruby would share with me, like, she had this amazing vision, and I wrote it and recorded it all down. And we have a work to do from God, and you're part of it, and the bishop's part of it, and we're all part of bringing all this stuff to the world. So it was, and it continued like that until I wanted to move on with life. And I would call it dragging my heels. So that was around October. And Jody flipped out because during one intervention, Chad was in the backyard with a bunch of friends. And it was my job to keep all the kids contained in the basement watching movies or playing video games. And I took the dog on a walk, and I thought they were done, but they weren't done. And Chad had all his high school friends over in the backyard. Jody flipped out. She was ready to come back to Ivan's on her own that night, and Ruby and Pam talked her into staying. But that was the first night where Ruby said, I want a separation from you. And it was an in-home separation. And so it was...
I don't understand how that would work, an in-home separation. Basically, like, I want to emotionally separate myself from you or something, even though we're living under the same roof.
It was hard. Basically, there were all these rules now placed on me. Like, I could leave when I wanted, but I couldn't come back until Ruby gave me permission. I couldn't come into the kitchen to eat until Ruby gave me permission. And the upstairs where Jody roamed was completely off limits. I couldn't go upstairs anymore in my own house.
Oh my God.
And there would be, Ruby would dictate all of the terms of how our interactions would be, when we would talk, and that was hard. And it was during that time that I really became, I would say, dependent upon Ruby. Like if she said a kind word to me, like my whole day was made, right? And
Yeah. That definitely sounds like some form of emotional abuse by Ruby to him.
so that separation continued all the way up until the holidays, maybe the last week of December, first week of January, and then Ruby ended that separation. Jody went home like the second week of January, but by that time, like Ruby, Pam, and Jody were completely determined to do this work that they felt God had for them, and I thought it was crazy. Like I thought it was just batshit crazy. Like Ruby, you have a reputation, you have a multi-million-dollar business, you have a brand, and you are just giving it away. She wanted to legally like work with Jody's attorney to basically give Jody 8 passengers and become an employee of Connections. So basically, the contract
Okay, sorry. I'm gonna keep going.
was Ruby gives Jody everything, and Ruby gets nothing in return. Our manager, our YouTube manager at the time, was like, red flags. Like, I don't know how to tell you. She's scamming you.
Yes.
Ruby fired.
I'm sure that guy was like, dodged a bullet. I'm fine being fired from those people. Nuts.
And I was like, I believe our manager. I think he's right. And Ruby started threatening me with another separation. And just like, this isn't about money. This is about doing God's work. So we continued in that dynamic for the next 6 or 7 months until she went on a trip with Jody and Pam down to.
And by the way, there's a question here. Draco Amy, can you fire a YouTube rep? Well, his what he called a YouTube manager, maybe what he was thinking of is somebody who's actually like a brand manager, someone who, well, maybe not. Maybe someone to help them manage the overall channel, but not necessarily someone assigned to them by YouTube. Because when you are at the level that they were at, certainly, it's normal to have someone who helps to manage sponsorships coming in, helps to manage, all kinds of different like business deals that you can make for the channel. And maybe they were under contract to be working with this person until they separated with that person. You can definitely fire a brand manager that you decide to hire to bring you deals on their own. Okay. So then they go with Pam down to Arizona.
And I think they, like, when I read her journal, she went into Mexico or something and bought or something like prescription for the emergency kits. And when she came back from that trip, before she even brought the bags into the house, she pulled me in and said, I want to talk with you. And that's when she asked me to leave. And that was July 20th.
Interesting that now his use of language has changed in the way that he describes it. Before it was, I was invited to leave. Now it was, I was asked to leave.
2022. My interactions with Jody at that point became one of Jody. I was still in the men's group, but the dynamic changed. Instead of being like one of the top people that helped run groups and help support, all of a sudden I felt like I got knocked to the bottom. And Jody was just piling on me every week in the men's groups. And the other men just do whatever Jody does. If Jody piles on somebody, they all pile on. If Jody praises somebody, they all praise. And so it really felt like a pack of dogs. And Jody was the alpha. And
This, when he says this, it reminds me of the phone calls that Jody had from jail. There's some man that she was talking to in one of them, and based on his responses, he sounded very like just very agreeable with her, when she's talking about all excitedly about like, you know, this passage from Luke or from Mark, and oh, that's me, I'm the martyr kind of thing. The guy that she was talking to definitely sounded like some kind of a yes man, that I wondered if maybe this was one of the guys that's sort of like high up in the ranks of her organization that she has established here. Um, but who is still very much a yes man.
And whoever she, sicked the dogs on, they would go. Whoever she praised, the dogs would just lick them up and down. And that's how these groups went. And so once I was in separation, every week was just psychological. And Jody was running it. Everything was on Zoom. And I knew that the only way I would ever get back into my house was I had to get Jody's approval. If I didn't get Jody's approval, I would never get Ruby's approval. But it felt like an impossible task, because no matter what I did, no matter how much I tried to track better, be truthful and not be selfish, every week it was like, you're being manipulative, you're being selfish, you're lying, you're hiding something.
Once again, selfish. That word comes up. Selfish. You're being selfish. You're hiding something. To me, like that speaks about, that criticism is more about somebody having boundaries than them actually exhibiting some sort of selfish behavior that is detrimental to someone outside of them. Interesting.
Something, you're still hiding stuff. And I really started to question my sanity, honestly.
This is Jody that you're talking about.
And so that continued for an entire year, but it became more and more and more and more and more isolating until, Jody had an approved list of men that I could make phone calls to. And it was basically 3 men, but 2 of those, all 3 of those 3.
Separation from society in general, and then from the overall group is one of those tactics that you see in these kinds of cases a lot. Like for example, separating someone from their family is a really big one. But then also like not allowing them to talk to outsiders who are not part of the group is just, everything about this screams cult. It really does. And that being used as a particular tactic to obtain and then maintain control over a human being. God, this is just wild.
3 men were like, we don't want to do phone calls with you anymore because you're being manipulative. And I'm like, well, who told you that? Well, Jody did. So I was completely cut off. And I, if I went to my church leaders, I was seeking enablement. If I went to my family, I was seeking enablement. If I went to anybody, I was seeking enablement. And so it felt like a no-win. I felt trapped. And that's where I was all the way up until the last week of July.
Yes, that separation, that what's the word for it? Separation from the rest of society. Like I said. Also, let me see here. Dang it, I just pretty sure no, did I not save it? Oh, come on. There was a really good point here. Let me see if I can scroll up and find it. I apologize. Okay, well, I see it up here on my YouTube screen. Prime 1309 has a really good point here. I've never been in a cult, but it's easy to normalize behavior if you're slowly put into it, like boiling a frog. It's easy for us to see how crazy this stuff is because we're seeing all of it at once. Exactly. This is one of the things about a case like this that we have to understand. When we're analyzing this, this live stream is a longer live stream. We've been talking for a while now at this point, so this is taking a bit, but all things considered, we are getting all of this information in one sitting. This is happening over years and years with these various individuals, and someone who said in her very first interview to the police, Jody told them, she's like, "Hey, I'm a psychologist. I know exactly how people can be twisted and manipulated and all this kind of stuff, because she herself has done it from what it looks like." So, especially if somebody has an understanding of how to do this over time slowly, it's wild. I mean, it's I don't want anyone to walk away thinking like you have to be of a particular like intelligent, like low intelligence level to find themselves in this situation. You could be an incredibly smart person and still find yourself in a cult or in a scam or in all kinds of things like this because of the various tactics that they will use for this kind of stuff. All right, let's continue.
When Jody called me one day out of the blue and just said, "I don't understand why you're not getting it. You're not changing. I don't get it. So I've been asking God what to do." And God told me that you need to have complete, what's the word they would use? Solitude with God.
Become a monk.
Yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? And
wow. So the isolation goes from you were isolated from the rest of the world that's outside of this group. And then it becomes you are isolated from everyone in this group except for these few people. And then you're just isolated down to you can talk to no one but yourself and God.
she's like, I don't want you to come to men's group anymore. And I don't want you to do phone calls with any of the men. And I'm like, well, then who am I going to talk with? Who's going to support me? God will. You need to learn to go to God. And so I'm just like, there's nobody. You're just, you're not going to be completely cut off. And she's like, no, you'll have God. And so that was the last week of July. And that was my last interaction and contact with Jody. But it was strange because around that time, things with Ruby started like picking up. And I didn't understand why, but like Ruby wanted to meet in a parking lot and wanted me to sign over titles of documents. Like the two of our cars wanted me to sign them over to her name. And to Ruby. But I was like, okay, I'm just not, I'm in total compliance mode at this point. Just like, I'm a good husband, you see, you can trust me. And so whatever she asked, like sign over the cars to me, no questions, just okay. And then another thing, she was like, I might want to do an investment, but I will need your signature. Do you trust me enough that I could get your signature if I wanted to pursue my own investment?
Wow. That's a big question.
Yeah, sure. Whatever you say.
How big of an investment? What you talking about? What did she tell you?
She never did, and I never signed anything. She never brought anything to me. But when I returned to the house, everything was packed up, and a neighbor came over and said she asked for the HOA rules and mentioned to him that she wanted to rent the house out, which I was like, are you kidding me? And apparently she wanted to sell the house, but couldn't because my name was on the mortgage. And I think that's what she was talking about of, will you sign something if I just put it in front of you? And you know what? I probably would have. Like, that's how messed up I was.
I'm glad you didn't.
Me too. That would have been disastrous. But I can't describe to you what it was to live it was more than a month really, in complete isolation. Believing that I was like evil and manipulative and lying and selfish, and that I had abandoned my family and that I was more interested in my selfishness than my family.
And I think moving forward, you going through that is going to be extremely helpful. I felt that way because a lot of those are the same words that were used with them, and you're going to understand how they felt,
We've already talked.
She's referring to the kids. So now moving forward, you can understand how the kids have felt through this whole experience because they used a lot of the same words. They said a lot of similar stuff.
about that actually. And the couple of times we've met, I've said, this is how I felt. Did you feel that way? Like, yes, this is how I felt. Like when we each confessed to things that we didn't do, I'm like, I confessed to things I never did, but I was so scared. And he's like, that's what I did too. So we connected on that level, you know, and it's crazy that anybody can get to that level of desperation, but we were there. We were there.
This was the end of July, what you're saying? End of July of 2022, or the last time you saw Jody was
23.
23. Okay.
The last communication I had with Jody was the last week of July. Might have been like the first couple days of August, but just
shortly before we made contact with you.
Yeah,
Or
like
you
month.
made contact with us.
Like a month before. Yeah. Okay. So for that whole month, my life was literally wake up, exercise, go to work, pretend everything's okay, come home, do connections like workbooks and read scriptures and try to strip selfishness out of my life. Like go to bed, wake up, repeat every day.
Trying to strip selfishness out of my life.
I was so upside down. And my plan was in 6 months, I get to reach back out to Jody again and she'll let me back in the group and then I can prove. Oh, I don't know if I heard a door knock, but I don't know if I did too.
Might be kids.
Might be. Oh.
And we can.
Has it been an hour?
Almost.
I told you it wouldn't take an hour. I'm
And
sorry.
we're good too if you need to head out. That was seriously.
I guess
We just wanted,
the only questions I would have, just going back, you said that she was having like these visions of like were you ever privy enough to understand or be told what those visions were?
A couple of them.
What were the two things she would tell you about?
So like one of them, she was walking along the beach with Jesus and Jesus challenged her to go walk on the water. And it was a whole lesson on walking on the water. Another, she would walk with.
So Jodi had dreams that Jesus was teaching her how to walk on water. I mean, okay, I guess it checks out at this point.
Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother. And she learned about, she had a pet lion in heaven named Charles. I don't know why I never forgot that name, but it was like this massive lion and she got to ride the lion and learned that, you know, all about who she was and this pet lion and all. There was another one where there was a lot of big ones where when she would go into possession mode, she would talk in like different voices. It was really creepy, but the voices would say, she's ours, we're not letting go. She's bride. She's mine. I'm going to marry her. You know, so if she was faking it, she believed that she was trying to, or wanted her as her bride.
And then you said, just clarifying, so last time you saw the kids was when you separated that in July, is that what I'm thinking? Of 2022. Do you have any questions for us?
No, I'm just really interested in the pen papers. Like for my own curiosity, I want to know what was going on and all of those little interventions.
I am very curious about those pen papers too.
I'll look back through the photos because, like I said, we documented everything in the home, whether we took it or if we didn't. And then I'll reach out to you, Mr. Kester, and let you know.
So I have
But-
a couple of observations when you're done.
Yeah, go for it.
So I always thought it was interesting, now that you mentioned that she was riding a lion. Kevin told me that when they were having these group meetings, she would never show up. She would show up on the WebEx, but in place of her person would just be this X for the connection. So it's like this Wizard of Oz thing going on. And I just thought that
She
was
never
kind
showed
of-
her face.
kind of eerie.
She
Yeah.
always covered herself.
Yeah.
Like even in the hottest of summer, she would wear these hoodies. She would smell so bad.
Yeah.
She would never bathe, but she was trying to hide her arms and stuff because apparently Ruby told me they were just like.
So the other thing that I think it's important for them to know is during that whole time when you were out, you only had communication with Ruby maybe 3 or 4 times. But each time, or at least on some of the occasions you spoke to her, she's telling you that everything's blissful, we're doing well, you know, everything's so much better without you.
Oh, that would be communicated to me by Jody every week and the men's groups too. And it was just like, you're abandoning your family. And it always hurt so bad because it's like, I want to be with my family so bad. What do you mean I'm abandoning them? If you wanted to be with your family, you would change. You would stop being selfish. But you keep being selfish, so you want it. And it just felt like, well, how do I stop wanting it then? It's like, then you must change. Well, how do I change? Well, you got to want it. Well, what? So how do I want it? You got to change. It's this like
perpetual cycle.
Yeah, and there's no. I tried to find my way into that cycle, and it felt like, you ever had a dream where there's like a problem you're trying to solve, but you can't solve it, and how frustrating you feel? That's what my life felt like. And as I'm looking back, I'm realizing there was no solution. You either had Jody's approval or you didn't. I wasn't doing anything different than the other men in the group.
I can believe that.
But they got her approval, so they were praised and they were repenting and they were doing everything right. I, on the other hand, was manipulative and selfish and enabling and all blah, 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 blah. And she became like the arbiter of truth, the arbiter of forgiveness, God's own mouthpiece. And it was just messed up.
Well, I'm glad that you're seeing clearly, and
coming out of the
kind of came out of it. Yeah. So, yeah.
One last discussion. So in the home, when the warrant was issued, there was a bag with $85,000 cash in it.
That's a lot of
I
money.
understand her lawyer, Ruby's lawyer, has all that.
I'm not.
Which home are we talking about?
Ivans.
In Ivans.
In the Ivans home.
We don't know. The money was left where it was left. We didn't take it. The house was secured when we left. We're assuming that Lamar Windward
Yeah,
was
he
able
has
to
it.
retrieve it, but we don't. I can tell you.
Yeah.
One of the other people.
So here's kind of the issue. That money, she cleaned out their bank accounts.
The kids' savings account.
Yeah, and yours too, your joint account.
Yeah.
So sounds like Jody took money that they had set aside for the kids, as well as money that was in the joint account for Ruby and Kevin together. Great. Awesome. Wonderful. Fantastic.
That's where that money came from.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you can have, or if I need to have a discussion with the county attorney. Kevin would kind of like his kids' money back.
Yeah. So it would be civilly. So I would go address that.
Talk to Lamar.
Lamar.
See what those funds are being used for.
I don't think he wants to give them up. And I wouldn't either if I were him.
Yeah.
I think he's using it for attorney fees.
Yeah.
I don't know if the county attorney is going to be able to separate that out unless the judge has already separated it out. Even the county attorney can look at it and go, it's civil, it's both your guys' money in some sense. And
But if you
the judge would have to divide that up to where it goes. We can do that. He's a county attorney one.
If you did go civil, though, I feel like that would be your fastest route to.
It's just dirty what she did.
Yeah.
She stole money. She stole money from my 18-year-old son out there. And it's wrong.
Well, the other thing that you didn't, that I don't know, I mean, there's a lot there, but I think they need to know that while Jody was living in your home, she was also purportedly giving therapy to Chad, and Chad was paying her. He's like,
at that time,
15,
we were
16.
paying her.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't until Chad moved out that part of his therapy was he needed to pay for his own therapy. So at age 17, he was paying her $900 a month to get brainwashed.
At 17?
He did.
What was he doing for work?
He worked at a lifeguard, basically.
Okay.
Lifeguard supervisor at
That's
two different rec
nice
centers. So it was like the majority of his check was going to Jody.
He was paying her more than he's paying rent, wasn't he?
3 times as much.
That's crazy. Obviously, you've seen her house. And what she has, she's making.
That's some pretty cheap rent. I'm not going to lie.
There's a lot of money going around. There's a lot of money. I don't know if we can. Sorry, I'm not sure if we know where that money came from or where it went. Like, it doesn't seem like she's had income within the past little bit. So,
Did her book sales, were her book sales?
I can't imagine. I can't imagine they were. Anyway, I need to get my kids.
Yeah, we'll definitely let you go. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate
I
it.
want to cooperate though in anything related to Jody and if I can help.
Okay, so he's basically saying, I'd like to help with anything having to do with Jody. Basically, like, let me help you take her down. Essentially, that sounds like what he's saying at the very end there. But like I said, that second interview is a whole other banana, right? A whole other series of bananas. Um, it's a lot to digest. It's a lot to digest. I don't know how much of that is believable to people. Um, I mean, how do you explain various aspects of it? How do you explain like the plates like animating by themselves and the noises and like there are some things that you could probably manipulate with like in-home special effects, right? Setting up um speakers and things like that, but there are some aspects of that would really take a lot. That's a lot of effort to really try to convince people um of the existence of something or the occurrence of something that is scientifically not possible, right? um Uh, Tish wants to know. Oh wait, sorry. Did we watch anything about the documents? I haven't brought up the journals in this one. There was not time. I mean, we're getting almost to 4 hours here on this. We've just gone through the various interviews, the jail calls, and things like that. If there is interest in going through the journals, I will definitely consider that. There's a lot, and it's hard to go through. She admits to a lot in those journals. Ruby's the one who kept that journal. General life advice: if you're going to do something that is considered by many to be illegal, maybe don't document it like especially in a lot of detail. Not legal advice, just general life advice. But anyway, there are aspects of this that were just wild. But I definitely had a greater understanding of the various characters involved in this case. It's been very enlightening. It's such a sad case. I mean, really, really sad. My greatest hope here is that everyone involved can get the help that they absolutely need. I mean, everyone who has had fingerprints in this case really should have some kind of help in moving forward with a healthy perspective on themselves and on life and everything. Most of all the kids, but to include Kevin, to include Ruby, to include Jody. And my hope is that all of them find some kind of health and wellness and are able to understand the absolute wackadoodle craziness of what happened in this family over the last year, over the last several years. And no, don't listen to her. If you are doing something questionable, please leave a detailed record of your crimes. Fair enough. But anyway, crazy stuff. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for those of you who have been watching live. If you're watching on replay, thank you. Those of you who have been engaging in the chat, or if you're leaving comments on the video, I appreciate all of you. If you haven't done so already, please do like the stream. It does help to sort of push this out to more people. Thanks to the folks that got memberships or bought memberships for others, or who super chatted. Very much appreciate every single one of you for helping to support the channel so that we can continue to focus on this kind of stuff, on these kind of cases, and really get deep into the weeds in a lot of this stuff. And last but not least, thank you, of course, to the mods for always helping to make sure that the discussion is a good environment for everybody to bring their different perspectives. I know this is a difficult case because we're not just talking about kids, we're not just talking about families, we're also talking about religion, we're also talking about cults, we're also talking about various different perspectives on this kind of stuff. And even though we don't like to get deep into the weeds on religion, because that's a quick way into some really tough conversations. In a case like this, it's hard to avoid it entirely, because there's just so much that's like wrapped in it, in this case. So, all right, you guys, that'll about do it. Indy, do you have anything to add? She's like, no, unless you want to give me food. Okay, guys, that'll about do it for me. And, Thank you once again for joining me, and I will see you guys in the next video.